Good evening, everybody. I am Art Bell, and we've got, I think, a very interesting show this evening. As usual, Linda Howe, she tells me she's got quite a report for you this evening. Linda Howe, generally regarded across the world as the preeminent expert, I guess, in crop circles, animal mutilations, and their connection to UFOs. So we'll do that, and then we'll follow it with John Rhodes. John Rhodes has been investigating the human reptilian connection. And aside from knowing some individuals that I might put in that class, or at least descended from that class, I don't know very much about the subject. He will also talk to us about underground bases a little bit. Now, that would certainly make sense if you're talking about the reptilian connection, I guess. At any rate, we will explore all of that this evening, so I'm looking very much forward to it. And in just one moment, Linda Howe. And he got a letter from John Rhodes, and I'll read to you in part what he said. Art, in recent years, I have been researching and lecturing about UFOs, underground bases, and occulted archaeology. I've also placed the emphasis in my research on the connection between the ancient and intelligent bipedal race of serpent beings called reptilians and human beings. These investigations have yielded numerous religious, cultural, and genetic links that provide extremely compelling evidence to the fact that we are genetic descendants of a highly technologically advanced race of alien reptilian beings living on our planet. Now, that ought to be tease enough for you, and I'll add a little something to that. I've received information from a number of guests that we are going to book in the future that also maintain that if not reptilian, certainly there has been a very advanced, and there is evidence of, a very advanced civilization that has lived here on Earth previously. And that's always interesting since we're here now, and I assume we'd prefer not being relics of some future civilization's examination. So we'll get all into that in a moment. It is indeed, in one moment, the human-reptilian connection. And I think most of us would like to hope there isn't one. And now, coming from not very far away, actually, Henderson, Nevada, here is John Rhodes. John, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Art.
It's good to have you.
It's good to have you, too. And by the way, happy birthday. I got wind that it was your birthday on Saturday.
It was, indeed. Oh, it's a wonderful birthday, John.
Great.
Wonderful. John, I don't know where to start. Tell us a little, if you would, about yourself, I guess, first.
Okay.
Who is John Rhodes?
John Rhodes is a gentleman of about 34 years of age. When I was younger, I lived most of my life overseas. My parents were, one was a swimmer, my mother, and my father was a pilot that used to work for Air America, which was an old CIA operative.
That's right.
And I had the opportunity as a child to live a lot of different places overseas, including Vietnam when I was 6, 7, and 8, and over in the Middle East in Beirut, Lebanon. And then I came back to the United States here, of course, completed my education. And it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago I started getting interested in what was going on as far as the UFO field and unexplained phenomenon, because I felt that there was just something that wasn't right as far as the reality in which we were living.
Well, you heard me say, I'm sure a little while ago, I've had a lot of guest information lately from people who have been studying for some time the possibility that a civilization existed here on Earth long before we ever did, and that though there are artifacts, they are few, and most of the evidence of their existence has been erased. Does that fit in with what you believe?
That fits in. They've either purposely been erased, in my opinion, or else they've been erased due to natural geological changes, including being sunken into the earth underground. And I think most recently we started as human beings being aware of the actuality of these civilizations, not only by seeing things above the surface, such as the Great Pyramids and the unexplained pyramids of Mexico and Central America and South America, and all those beautiful pieces of architecture left behind that really we sit here in awe with, even with today's engineering skills. But when we started, I think, getting into looking underground as far as geological exploration for oil and also subsurface use of space for storage for oil fields and gasoline and food, etc., that we started finding a lot of things underground that left even more of a mystery than what we had above ground.
Again, I've got to stop you for a second, John. It's really interesting that you should be saying that, because there is a project ongoing now in Alaska called HARP.
Right.
I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yes, I have.
And it's supposedly got a dual purpose, and one is to heat up the ionosphere to see what will happen. I'm not sure about that one. And the other purpose, supposedly, is to try and map underground tunnels and caves. And I thought, underground tunnels and caves. Now, why are we wanting to look underground? What do we think is underground that we don't know about?
Apparently, there seems to be more underground that's worth looking at than above our heads in space with the NASA program. I've read about HARP, and I've also looked into the shuttle bay experiments in which they were using ground-probing radar. They said to help study the Rwandan ape because of the war in Rwanda.
Right.
And that just kind of hit me as kind of funny. And I think that because of today's technology, with the ability to burrow underground with thermal nuclear boring machines that have been patented in U.S. patent books by Los Alamos Laboratories, I know before you had a really great researcher on the air, Richard Sauter, and
That's right.
He's done a lot of studies on this and brought a lot of information forward to the public, declaring that the United States and other countries by now have very easily been able to penetrate the Earth with these thermonuclear boring machines that literally vitrify the rock, and what's left over is about 25% of mass. And since it's molten lava, they compress it towards the tunnel walls, and it permeates through the tunnel walls, creating a self-aligned tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
This is great when you look back at a lot of the old stories of people in caves and caverns, even when you're talking about books like Edadorfa and other stories like the Smoky Gog, in which people talk about the Hollow Earth. These stories were coming out long before we were even aware of the technology about glass-lined tunnels, and that's exactly what the technology is available today, is to leave glass-lined tunnels behind. And these people were reporting them way back in the last century.
But these are tunnels, John, that we would have created, so we would therefore, for the most part, know they are there, certainly at high government levels. The implication of HARP is that we're looking for stuff that we don't know is there.
Right. Well, if it's very simple in terms, I mean an engineering term, due to this technology to be able to burrow underground, then that leaves us a whole new issue. Not only would NORAD have to worry about missiles coming from overhead from the north, and also be able to look out for any kind of missile attack from above, now we've got a whole new issue about how do we prevent other countries or other species from burrowing under the ground into our continent, into the North American country, and coming near sensitive facilities or near sensitive government buildings.
God, there's an awful thought.
So, I mean...
you know that you're right. I mean, it would have national security implications,
Absolutely.
And now I suddenly understand, even the alien question or the reptilian question aside, there would be national security reasons. Suddenly it dawned on me.
All the billions of dollars they had spent so far, now they've just figured out that they've only done 50% of their job. Oh. So there had to be this large launch into being able to see who and what is underground at what depth and who they are. If, as I believe, there are other alien species coexisting here on this planet with us, they want to make sure not that these species are telling them where they are, but they want to be able to make sure of being able to verify themselves exactly who is where. And also, when you start looking at the fact that in 1988 they created a National Cave Resources Act, which prevents people from going into a cave.
That's right.
With a $10,000 fine and 1 year imprisonment for each entry.
That's right. And it's supposedly to protect the natural resource of the caves. Isn't that correct? That
is correct. There are some caves, absolutely, that have been defaced. But the majority of caves across the United States, most people don't want to go near a cave, because there's a certain amount of superstition and a little bit of spookiness going into a dark, hollowed-out piece of the earth.
Sure, I'm one of them. I wouldn't do it.
I had to overcome that fear due to my own research and looking around.
Oh, now, wait a minute. You mean you actually have made some trips?
Yes, I've been into cave systems and also into mines, and I can tell you one thing, that there is certainly, I had to do it because look, I'm afraid of climbing, I'm afraid of going into a cave, yet I had to confront my fears in order to fulfill my research that I'm doing.
Right.
And believe me, in some instances I've been shaking. I mean, I used to watch people climb a mountain and I think these guys are crazy.
Yeah, I still think that.
You see, then I'm faced with the position of having to go out and learn how to do it myself. But there's been instances where I've gone into certain caves because I've heard that they are one instance in particular. It was a reptilian outpost very near Las Vegas. As a matter of fact, Las Vegas has almost overrun it.
Oh, really?
And when I went in there, a friend of mine told me that this cave had a steel door down a shaft. It was really an old mine. It had a steel door down a shaft after you went down a vertical pit. So I went in with my friend. In order to get in there, you had to crawl horizontally on your belly for about 20 feet before you could even stand up because the cave ceiling was right at your back. And then I went in there. Mm-hmm. I looked for this door. It wasn't there. And then I was feeling kind of odd. I scraped my knuckles and my fingernails into the wall because it looked kind of wet. And I could feel mud go under my fingernails, and I saw like a scrape of mud. But when I retrieved backwards, I thought, well, I have to take a picture because this door isn't here, and I want to be able to show my friend who told me about this. And when I took the picture, I saw a streak of light come up. And I looked down at my hands. After I turned my flashlight back on, I looked down at my hands, and there was no mud underneath my fingernail, nor was there any mud on my hands.
Ooh,
and when I got the actual photograph developed, there was a streak of light going from the bottom left to the top right with a huge wall of light underneath it, diffused off to the right-hand side. I have a feeling, and I'm not any technical expert in this area, and it's just my opinion, but I have a feeling that there was holographs at work there. And with the flash of the camera, it was trying to adjust for that instantaneous change of light level, and it couldn't quite do it. And this is one of the recent photographs I have of anomalous activities underground.
What? By the way, I would give my eye teeth to get hold of one of those photographs, John.
Oh, I'll send you a copy.
Oh, you will?
Oh, sure.
All right. I'll tell you, John, I'm right in the middle of writing a book, and I'd be glad to give you credit. So if you want to include permission to publish it, I'll stick it in there.
I don't think there will be a problem.
All right. Wonderful. I mean, I really love being able to get these photographs out, and
absolutely.
I've got a bulletin board system, by the way, where we do that. We take special photographs like the one you're talking about and make them available, so I'll do that as well. Boy, that's fascinating. I don't know if I could have overcome my fear, and I sure don't know that I could crawl through a space just barely big enough for me to crawl through. I wouldn't like that at all. Earth above, earth below, earth to each side. There's something about that that would be very claustrophobic.
It is a little bit of something to overcome.
Yeah.
But one thing is that I've realized through doing all the research that I have is that the old phrase from, I think it's out of the Bible that says, as above, so below, it really does encounter pretty much the question of the UFO phenomenon.
All right, what is it that you believe is down there, John?
Well, when I started thinking about, the one question that really started narrowing me into my field of research which was primarily getting into the reptilian area, which is I started questioning as to why is it that the majority of contactees who meet the Nords and who meet these other wonderful beings from craft are told that they have some sort of a non-interference clause where they're not allowed to interfere with us. Yet at the same time, through that contact, there was a form of interference, but not on the scale of which the Greys, what you see now is the Greys, the 4.5 foot tall, standard Grey, which is the alien with the large black eyes and the thin extremities and the large head. Why is it that they, along with less frequent but still reports of contacts with them and the reptilian beings who have been reportedly been the ones giving them orders or commanding them, why is it that these two particular species have repeatedly been talked about in the field? What gives them the right where others do not have the right to interfere with us, even when they're talking about doing the experiments with people on craft, as they do. And that started making me look more into our own historical perspective as to what is there left, what's really left of our own history that hasn't already been hidden or just naturally lost that could explain to us the existence of these beings. Number one is, when you look at the grays, the oldest reference I can find to anything that's like a gray is that the Hopi Indians refer to these grays as ant people.
Ant people.
And from our own visual perspective now, we can see why they would maybe refer to them as ant people. Say, for instance, what if this being came from underground, or you had knowledge that they lived underground?
Mm-hmm.
They had large eyes, as do ants, thin extremities, as do ants, large craniums, as do ants. And, of course, now we can understand that they might have just said, well, this is an ant person, you know.
Or it would be their easy reference, yes.
Exactly.
Sure.
And
you're right about the features. When you consider an ant, those similarities are quite striking. John, hold on just a second. We'll be right back to you. My guest is John Rhodes, and now I'm beginning to make a bit of the connection myself. How about you? I couldn't quite understand the human-reptilian connection, but I'm beginning to get there, I think. More in a moment. John, question for you. An obvious question somebody would ask would be, well, if they're reptilian and they are from, in essence, below Earth, then what are the UFOs? In other words, what's the connection? Are they actually some previous race of humans, or are they from somewhere else occupying our inner ground?
Well, that's a good question. Let me explain this. First of all, I started noticing that I believe that they are a species that are off the original trunk or the tree of life, the first genetic creation that took part on this planet. And this may or may not be so, but this is, from what I've been able to gather, this is my perspective. And we are further genetic chains or genetic branches off that original trunk.
In a process, John, of evolution or creation, or both, or do you not?
I think it's both. I think originally it was divine creation, and then shortly after that there was intervention of sorts. And when I started, what really clued me in on this is starting to look at the antiquity of the serpent and serpent worship around the world. There is no animal on Earth that has been revered so highly and taken both ends of the spectrum, whether it's negative or positive, into the influence of man and his religion, than that of the serpent or the snake.
True. That's true.
You can also include in that category dragons, lizards, and any of the reptilian species, but primarily the serpent, the snake, and or the dragon.
John, are there not some religions, it strikes me back in the Appalachian Mountains particularly, Christian religions, serious thumper religions, where they use a snake as a demonstration of how they can overcome, and I hesitate to use the word evil. I don't know if evil is right, but overcome something or another, and they use them in religion.
Yeah, they dance with the snakes and they tempt them almost to bite them.
That's right, as though you cannot harm me.
Right, and
yes.
through their own faith in God, they think that once they are bitten, that they'll survive. And in fact, when many people, when they're bitten, do in fact swell up, because of the venom.
Right.
But yes, the serpent actually exemplifies both the positive and negative religious implications. We look at, first of all, the Japanese and the Chinese revere the serpent or the snake and the dragon as being something very benevolent, while at the same time we're told through our own religions that the being who stood in the Garden of Eden, and remember, it was the only reference in the Holy Bible that we could even talk to animals, was that of a reptilian. And this reptilian was smart enough to start teaching us. And when you look at the connections between the Sumerian text talking about Enlil, or E, having been a divine being from an extraterrestrial being who was involved with the genetic manipulation of man, and supposedly he lived in a place called Snake Marsh, and he was the one that had taken a branch of the mammalian man and mixed it with some of the reptilian being. And the place where he lived, of course, was Snake Marsh, like I said, but you could think of a place where snakes live as a den. And then we come back to looking at the biblical explanation in Genesis where they talk about the reptilian being in a place called Eden and giving man knowledge.
Eden. Yeah.
Right, Eden. And these types of little pieces of information are all over the place, and it's just a matter of being able to make the connections. I believe that one reason that it's really interesting to note that amongst many of the religious cultures of the world, it's a common rule or law, religious law, that they are not allowed to draw or make anything of that which is in heaven.
All right, John, we've got to pause here at the top of the hour.
Okay.
We'll be back. Relax for a few moments. Eden, that's quite a jump, huh? A little emphasis, but big meaning. We'll be right back. Now again, here I am, my guest, John Rhodes, the human-reptilian connection, and it sounds kind of strange at first, but as you listen, it begins to sound a little less strange. This, of course, is a program where we examine different sorts of things you don't hear about elsewhere. In a moment, I've got one very good facts and a question for John. Now, you too could be sending me a fax if you would like. As a matter of fact, if you have a question for John Rhodes, my fax number is area code 702-727-8499. 702-727-8499, 24 hours a day. Now, if you don't have a fax machine, we can sell you one of those. There was a report on this last hour's news of an earthquake in the Sierra Nevadas, between Nevada and California, of about 4.5. And before we continue with what we were doing, John, I want to ask you, this is just the latest in what has seemed like a worldwide swarm of earthquakes. I mean, it seems, John, they've been getting more frequent. Earthquakes are underground affairs. I just thought I would ask whether you have any comment.
Well, yeah, I do have a comment, and that is that going back to the Hopi Indians, they believe that we are coming across or coming to the end of one of the great cycles at which Earth naturally starts to go through evolutionary changes of its own. And these changes are not slow in process. They're extremely rapid. I've pulled information off the Colorado Earthquake Center and did some graphs on it, and it shows that the lower magnitude earthquakes between 1982 and 1993, some of them, like I think it's from 2 to 3, 2 to 2.9, had increased over 8,000% in frequency. So when you start looking at something laid out in a graphics form as telling you how often these earthquakes are happening and how much more they're happening every year, it tends to make one sit back and worry a little bit.
Well, yes, that's what I've been doing, and I've been doing, John, talk radio a long time now, and it is to the point now where I'm reporting 1 or 2 earthquakes a day most times. Right. So you say there's an 8,000%?
In some cases it is. The larger magnitude earthquakes have not increased in frequency. They're beginning to, but overall the lower magnitude earthquakes have over a 10-year period or 12-year period. This shows that it's building up for massive energy release because it's got to snap somewhere along the line. When we look at the fact that FEMA, as an organization, 10 out of $11, according to some of the reports in newspapers that were reported, said that FEMA spent 11 out of $12 preparing the United States for Armageddon. I think that, yes, there's a definite worry about nuclear weapons getting into third world countries' hands and terrorist hands, but there's also a very logical precaution that our government would have to take in order to ensure its own survival. And that's one of the reasons that, like, since the 1950s, they've been heavily, heavily involved with building very, very deep underground bunkers.
Well, all right, here we are underground once again. It seems to me if there were an underground civilization of either creatures related or not related to us, if they had that kind of mobility underground, they might have the ability to manipulate in some way the tectonic tectonic pressures and releases and so forth and so on. Is that too speculative?
Well, no, I believe that could be utilizing some sort of Reichian or Tesla technology, or even other technology that we couldn't even put a name to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, from my own perspective, I think the Earth is somewhat of a living organism, and just as a human being goes in to get needles put into their head through acupuncture to relieve certain stresses and strains, I think that it's very possible to do that to the Earth. However, it's only a temporary remedy. The overall problem has to be cured, otherwise the remedy itself won't last.
All right, here's a fax. Dear Art, greetings from a fellow Gemini. Your guest is interesting about the reptilian-human connection. Whenever you have a guest about alien species or ancient history, I frequently recall the 5-part, 2-hour movie named V. The movie was on TV, back when I had a TV. It's about an aliens coming to Earth to help us with many of our problems. But as the story progressed, one investigative reporter had a suspicion that all was not as rosy as they put out for one aspect, even though they looked human. The investigative reporter found out that beneath the disguise, they were reptilian who ate mammals, including humans. Have you and or your guest seen the movie?
Yes, I have seen the series and the film. I've also seen very many other reptilian forms recently come into the media in order to make us either afraid or love them. In the case such as E.T., we were made to feel very good and secure about the alien that is what we could refer to as like a gray.
Yeah, but
very small and not intimidating.
Or even cute. You know,
right.
they managed to get E.T. cute.
Right, in one scene, as a matter of fact, in that movie, it was even cuddled up with all the bears, the teddy bears.
That's right.
You know,
Cute,
so,
it loves children, dogs, that kind of thing. But somehow I get the feeling that a lot of... Well, for example, the report Linda did before you came on the air, did you hear that sound?
Yes, I did.
That would not come from something that I would describe as cute.
I kind of agree with that, but then at the same time is that, we all have our perspective. I mean, to perhaps another being, that was celestial music, and to us, it's not. So, and when you look at the programs like V and such, take, for example, I believe that we have been seeing a lot of the grays. The grays, from what I've been able to learn through other researchers, such as what I consider the great researchers like Bill Hamilton and Bruce Walton and Tom Adams and Cherry Hinkle and Tao out in California, from what we've been able to gather as a group, is the fact that these 4.5-foot tall grays are an intermixture between genetically hybrid beings that are used to be intermediaries between the reptilians and the humans, because if the reptilians came out full form, as they could and as they will in the future, it would be much too frightening for us now. So they use something a little less intimidating, which are these grays. With the media, when you looked at programs recently like Stargate.
Yeah, I just saw Stargate. Gosh, what a movie.
Okay, now, when you start looking at a program like Stargate and realize that here's this being that made its presence known on a planet and had its association with ancient history, like the pyramid, and then said, I'm come down here and I was part of that which created you.
Yes.
And you should pay homage to me. The last image we saw when this being was obliterated was that of a reptilian, a standing reptilian. And
That's
it comes
true.
very fast, but you have to look at it. And that made us, on a very almost subliminal level, think of a reptile as something to be afraid of.
Yes.
We've heard abductions where humans have been abducted through UFO experience, in which they have been forcibly raped by reptilians, large 7-foot tall beings with that are bipedal, bifocal, and have the regular scales and eyes that look like flame. And that statement in itself can be taken back to a lot of ancient writings, and that are forcibly raped. And when I started thinking, wait, I don't understand this. If the reptilians are like that, but yet they're trying to make the grays look good, why, if they're going to all come out someday, how could that be when we've had just the reports of the Greys being presented to us as something that's really
Okay,
nice?
what do you think the Greys are? Are they biological entities? I've heard them described as that, and possibly machines.
Well, I believe that they're both. I believe that the original gene or the genetic strain by which the Greys originated from, they are just like we are, natural beings, and some of them are good and some of them are bad. But then again, I believe that maybe due to the scarcity of them or not having too many here, that certain parts of their genetic strains were taken and chained up and linked together with human chains and or other chains and became what you consider biological robotoids who perhaps don't have a soul. But then again, we look at some animals and think that can't have a soul. But I think the main question here is that we've been so conditioned as a human species to be able to take what's visually presented to us and make very quick judgments. And as there are good humans and bad humans, so must there be reptilians who are of certain physical characteristics, say like a reptilian, right, that is good as well as bad. There have got to be Greys that are good as well as bad. That is one of the laws of nature.
All right. I also find quite a bit of religious underpinning as you discuss your philosophy of who you believe these beings are. Is that about right?
Well, you can't avoid it. I believe that if they've been here for as longer than we have, then obviously in some ways they have had the opportunity to manipulate our religious perspective.
So the argument then is, are they the creators, or is there a creator beyond? And the impression I get from you is you believe there is a creator beyond.
Oh, I definitely believe that. Okay. Just as the laboratory rat might turn to us and look over the edge of the cage and say, "Are you it?" Right?
Yes.
And anyway, to get around to the connection that we have between these beings, I started looking into a book called The Dragons of Eden, written by a very intelligent man called Carl Sagan. And in Carl Sagan's book, he theorizes on the evolution of human intelligence. And in that book, he refers to a gentleman by the name of Paul MacLean, who's a neuroanatomist. Now, Paul MacLean has said, through his own research and investigations, that the most ancient part of the human brain is called the R complex. And the R stands for reptilian because we share this same configuration of matter with reptiles. And it is the most ancient part of the human brain that rests above the spinal cord. The neocortex and the limbic system are built around it. In other words, they're adaptations to this very ancient part of the brain. Well, if you believe in the regular creation theory in which or the evolutionary theory, which we came from a pond as fish and waddled up on the surface and we evolved from there, that would make sense because we would see the connections with ourselves and reptiles.
All right. Well, thankfully, there appears no further connection, for I feel no draw to go out by my porch light where there's lots of bugs, and thrust my tongue out and grab a few of them.
A fork tongue, I'm sure.
On that note, we'll pause for just a moment. Forked, I hope not. For I'm about to do a couple of commercials. Here is a deal you cannot refuse. Fork tongue. All right. In just a moment, we're going to get back to John Rhodes and talk a little more about all of this. As a matter of fact, let's do that now. John, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
What I was going to say is that on top of the fact that the neuroanatomists say that the most ancient part of the human brain, the most central part, an archaic part, is called the R complex because it stands for reptilians and we share it with reptiles. There's also other striking connections that have been recently brought to my attention, and one of them was that in Omni magazine, September 1994, they had written an article May 1994, called Lizard's Love. And what they discovered is that male iguanas were getting extremely, let's put it this way, they were starting to love their owners, the female owners anyway, the women who owned iguanas.
Really?
And it happened during the menstrual cycle. And they discovered that it's because that female humans secrete a pheromone that is absolutely chemically identical to that of a female iguana. Chemically, it's an absolute
Right.
identical match to a female iguana, and that's why the male iguanas were getting so amorous. And on top of that, you have many other connections, just as you
So
hear.
you would say that as sort of a hormonal connection.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. And then when you start looking about, well, this most ancient part of the brain and all these connections, what does it mean? Well, when the human embryo is in the female womb, it undergoes, probably during the first 7 weeks, certain changes in its formation. As a matter of fact, what happens is genetic history starts replaying itself through the embryonic growth. And I hope that
John, all right, I'm sorry to stop you again, but what about the gigantic difference between our systems? Mammals, warm-blooded, reptilians, cold-blooded. I mean, that really is a big, seemingly gigantic evolutionary difference.
Yes, but at the same time, even paleontologists today, some paleontologists are starting to think twice as to whether all the dinosaurs back in the age of the dinosaurs were in fact cold-blooded.
Oh, you're right. I've heard that. You're absolutely right. That's been some of the later news.
Right.
I'm sorry I didn't recall that. Thank you.
And according to Dale Russell, who's a scientist, anthropological scientist with the Canadian National Museum of Natural Science in Canada, he said that a dinosaur by the name of Stenonychosaurus equalis, if it had not undergone such a catastrophic change as apparently took place and killed out the dinosaur age, that because of its brain-to-body mass ratio, which was extremely close to those of primitive mammals, and the fact that it was bipedal, that if it had been allowed to evolve as the dominant species that it was heading towards being, that nowadays it would have resembled that of a walking, talking, what we consider through looking at the abduction report, reptilian being.
All right, John, hold it right there. We've got a break at the bottom of the hour and something I've got to get done very quickly, so let me do that. We'll take our break and come right back. My guest is John Rhodes, the human-reptilian connection, and we will get deeper into this subject in just a moment. From the high desert, this is Dreamland. My guest is author, lecturer John Rhodes. He talks of the human-reptilian connection and things underground. We will get to phone calls here in a couple of moments. I've got a couple of very good questions. One of them about the hum. Now, back to John Rhodes. John, I know I'm skipping around a lot, but when I have somebody who's an expert on underground, I've got a lot of questions, and I know that you've heard about this. I have a good friend, John, who built a porch here in Pahrump, Nevada, other side of the valley. He sank big beams into the ground in order to do this. After he built it, he had such a bad hum, John, that he could not sleep at night in his house. That's how bad it was. He ended up having to redo the whole thing in a different way. Something was being picked up and transmitted into his home from underground. What have you heard about this?
Well, I know that the underground hum that's been heard, like in Taos,
Yes.
is not limited to just the Taos area, but has actually been heard in different countries around the world as well. And it's been happening for longer than most people realize. My own idea of what it may be, we've heard the theories about using ELF and loop antennas to be able to communicate, through the water and over the atmosphere with submarines around the world.
That is correct.
I know that the Colorado Bureau of Mines patented a device that actually uses ELF to communicate through the rock. In other words, it doesn't need any cables or anything. It just uses the rock to carry the signal. And the lower the frequency, the greater the coverage area. And when you start talking about, all I perceive now as my reality is moving atoms and frequency. And all we really have to live by this time around in our lives is this mass or different combinations of frequencies combined together to create different objects and different light. And when you start talking about the Taos hum, you're talking about a frequency that's being put through the earth, but yet at the same time there's a lot of natural crystal formations within the earth that could take certain branches of this frequency and, I guess you could say, change it or mutate it so we may have some sort of a sympathetic resonance with it.
Interesting.
Around the meninges of the brain, which is the sheath covering the blood-brain barrier, we have a high quantity of what they call magnetite crystal. And what this is that Dr. Kirschvink of Caltech had started looking into this, thinking that there's higher concentrations of magnetite crystal. Now, magnetite, mind you, is a naturally forming magnet ore. It's like lodestone in the earth. We don't eat it, but our body actually manufactures it. So when we have magnetite crystals surrounding our brain, that means that we as humans have everything necessary to make a transmitter or receiver, which is crystals, magnets, and energy and minerals. So if you're getting these different frequency fluctuations, I don't doubt whatsoever that we are somehow sympathetically resonating with those frequencies. As to what they could be, well, like we said before, perhaps they are some sort of a subsurface radar around these sensitive facilities looking for anything that may be coming near them.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Because a lot of these reports have actually come in from areas where previously people have said that there's some sort of anomalous activity happening with clandestine black book operations. So that's one possibility. The other is, of course, the communications. And the other one is, of course, and I've thought about it, and I don't know how true it could be, that the people who are hearing them have implants. And somehow these implants are being triggered. So these people are being able to hear a sound. Because they're not quite hearing it, but they're sensing it all over. Now, I've heard sounds like that have continued for a period of 2 or 3 weeks, like a clicking, but then that clicking has stopped. I've also found out that other people associated with the group have heard the same sound at the same time, and it all stopped at the same time.
All right, this is from Sean in Yucca Valley. Then I'm going to give out the numbers, and we're going to answer some phones. Art, I have often heard it claimed there is only a 2% difference between humans and chimpanzees' genetic material. This seems to argue against any human-reptilian melding. Would you please ask John to comment on the point? In other words, as we look at genetic connection, I think the faxer is correct. There's a very close relationship to chimpanzees.
Oh, absolutely.
But genetically, not so close to reptilians.
Well, like I said, the connection is definitely there to reptilians. I'm not saying the primary connection or the most evidentiary one is, or the most dominant connection is. I do believe, like the caller had called in or faxed in, that yes, there is a high degree of connection with regular mammals like the primitive apes. However, it appears to be that the most dormant form of a connection that we have, coming from the archaic part of the brain, is that of a reptilian. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, the monkey or the reptile? So when you're talking about, I guess you could say, Paul McLean says that he's been able to excise like laboratory rats parts of their brain, or laboratory animals parts of their R complex. And what he's realized is that R complex dominates our behavior patterns as far as hierarchy, territoriality, ritualism, and aggressive behavior. And this is how he was able to find that out. So when we're talking about like who are we, it makes more sense to me that there's some sort of an important connection there with the reptilians, because I haven't heard too many stories of abductions by monkeys.
That's a good point.
Where I have heard the abductions by reptilians.
All right, John, let me quickly give out the numbers, and we'll take some calls. Fascinating topic. Gee. First-time caller line, area code 702-727-1222. The wild card line, several of those available. Area code 702-727-1295. Toll-free west of the Rockies, it's 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, it's 1-800-825-5033. Just one other quick thing, John, then we'll pick up some calls. The natural magnetic material that you say surrounds our brain.
Right.
Wouldn't that they're doing a lot of studies now about electromagnetic fields and how they affect us. And when I say that, I mean even radio, television, and microwave transmission. Would this be, do you see a connection, in other words? If we are receptors, then it seems to me that sort of energy might be received and or might be affecting us.
Right. Well, there's so many forms of energy that we're aware of, but I believe that there are so many forms of more subtle energies that we're not aware of, and I think we catch the full spectrum. Yeah, I think it's very unhealthy to live around power lines. As a matter of fact, they say that when people go into caves or cave systems or underground, there's a natural insulation there provided for them, so they're no longer walking on the surface as just regular human antennas.
That would be true.
You just have to stick up a good antenna, and you can figure out that, my God, there's thousands of frequencies shooting straight through us all the time. Thousands.
Yes, well, they're also doing a lot of work on intense magnetic fields, and I hate to admit this, I'm a ham operator.
Right.
And I've been doing so since I've been about 12 years old, so I've been getting exposed to close-in, large electromagnetic fields, RF, all my life. And frankly, and I'm sorry to have to report it, but they've done a lot of reports indicating that amateur radio operators and people exposed to a lot of RF do tend to have a higher cancer rate. So there may be something to all this.
But then again, just to comfort you, I know that the mind is so much more powerful than we've ever been allowed to previously conceive that it is or believe that it is.
Well, thanks for the comfort, John. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Rhodes. Hi.
Hi.
Where are you?
I'm calling from Oklahoma City.
Okay.
I've been listening to your show, and I just caught in on the latter part of your show this evening. One of the things I had in question when we were talking about Reptilian is I have a large amount of paperwork and work that's been gathered for the past 10 years from a friend of mine who believes she's an alien or a part alien. And she's given me her work, and it has hundreds of drawings and cryptic writings. And I'd like to know whom I can get in touch with to show this work to.
Well, cryptic writings, aliens, does it seem to relate to some sort of reptilian connection?
To some degree, in some parts of her notes it does.
It does.
I went and bought a particular book on cryptic writings from past centuries, trying to decipher some of the information.
All right. Listen on the air. John, it's a good opportunity. If somebody like that or anybody else wants to get hold of you, or maybe have you written a book, John?
Well, no, the book's in the works. I've just made a recent, we'll get into it a little bit more if you want. But
all right, then let me try this avenue. If they want to get hold of you and get you information.
Okay, this is what you do. First of all, if it's something that you're really, really frightened of somebody interfering or intercepting, the way to do this is to take it and fully register it and heavily insure it. This way, if it's ever missing in the mail accidentally, then you stand to make a little bit of money from it.
Sure.
Okay, now, I've had so many things missing through the mail. This is the only way I really, truly get things where I want them to go. I figure if they're going to end up missing, I might as well make a little living at it. Now, I'm going to give you I'll give you an address, and the address is John Rhodes, Rhodes,
right,
and that's Post Office Box 50381, Henderson, that's Henderson, Nevada, 89016-0381. Now, I also have a voicemail system set up.
Do it again, though.
Okay. It's John Rhodes,
right,
Post Office Box 50381, Henderson, Nevada, 89016-0381. And I have a voicemail also, which, if you don't mind, in case anybody needs to or would like to receive a package of information regarding this research and other related research, if they do a money order or check for $10 and send it to me, I'll get them off a comprehensive package. And if you'd like, go ahead and send it to that address. My voicemail, in case you want to notify me of anything or need some further information, like the address again, is area code 702-391-3335. That's 702-391-3335. And one other thing I have available in case people are interested in is I've done some psychoacoustic and psycho work. I've done some work with sound, and I've been able to create a subliminal self-hypnosis tape for abductees. And the reason I did this is because so many people are feeling like they've somehow been touched, and they don't have the money to go spend $90 an hour
That's right.
to go to a psychiatrist to get hypnosis. So I've used some very ancient metaphysical tones that correspond with the chakra, and I've gotten together with a very famous hypnotist out here in Las Vegas by the name of Helen Balcom.
Right.
And we designed this self-hypnosis tape that teaches people how to get themselves into the self-hypnotic state, as well as empower them through their experiences instead of allowing them to sit in the victimization role, and speak and recall some of these events if they so choose.
All right. If it's
And
not,
go ahead.
I was going to say, if it's not $90 an hour, how much is it?
It's $10, and once you buy it, I just welcome you until I otherwise tell you to go ahead and copy it, and please hand it out to your friends.
That's
Because
nice.
part of my job here, not only am I a spokesman for a group of people who have spent their lives working on subjects such as this, but my job here right now is to help people and empower people. And that's one of the reasons I also sometimes, when I go out and give lectures, I'll spend an extra day, take a handful of people, and teach them to investigate for themselves. Because we all need to put at least a little bit of work into it. And the more people who put work into it and forward the information to someone like myself, which is like a pivot point, then the more ability we have to be able to get a clearer perception on what's going on.
This is a shot in the dark, John. It's a fax. Ask John if he's ever heard or seen a human who has small holes on the side of the head near the top of the ear and in slightly toward the temple. I have exactly what I describe on both sides of my head and have yet to see this on any other human being. If your guest has no such experience, can you refer me to somebody you might know? Barbara in Santa Barbara. No, I certainly can't, John. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
I hesitate to answer simply because it hits so close to home. This last year, our 5-year-old girl had recently awoken one morning and was worrying about her ears and scratching at them. And I looked inside, and just on the inside of the ear, but still within the actual outside fleshy piece against the temple, was a perfectly circular cored-out hole. Now, that in itself would not be so remarkable if it weren't for the fact that when I looked in the opposite ear, 180 degrees around, on her other side of her head, was another perfectly cylindrical hole, right in the exact same location. So, yes, I haven't heard very many other people talk about it, but it's really strange that that your caller should happen to ask that question.
What?
I mean, that's really odd.
Yeah, okay. What would you say to her? I mean,
All I could say is that...
Do you want her to contact you?
Well, yeah, I mean, she's more than welcome to contact me, as well as I invite absolutely anybody out there whatsoever who may have information regarding any experiences or any other information regarding the reptilians or reptiles or any sort of a contact or abduction to contact me and send me a copy of the information. I'd really appreciate it. That way it would enable me to be able to get a little better perspective on what's going on.
Here's a quick, crazy question, because we're about at the top of the hour. A lot of people, when they are abducted, some have actually reported underground experiences. Others have reported that they are in the interior of something. Now, I wonder if it could be, John, that in many times they are not in a craft at all, but in some sort of underground structure.
Excellent point. That's an excellent point. And I think the best thing we could do is try and get to that at the top, after the top of the hour, because that's an area in all itself. I can tell you that in the very few experiences that I personally have had that I can consciously remember, was one in particular in which I was sitting in a craft that was like the interior of a Hopi Indian or Pueblo Indian kiva.
All right, hold that thought. We'll be right back to you. I want to remind everybody our bulletin board service is up with 5 nodes. You can call it at area code 702-727-1709. That's our BBS. We'll be right back. Here I am, and we've got a whole bunch. There's a lot of interest. John, I'll tell you, we're generating a lot of interest. I've got a fistful of faxes here, and we'll try and get to those questions as we can. Reminding you, the east of the Rockies line is 1-800-825-5033. Now, John, I've got a whole lot of faxes and questions here and phone calls. It's going nuts. Let's talk abductions for a moment. It seems to me that indeed a lot of people describe rooms, not necessarily ships, but rooms or even underground, that they know they're underground, and they've been abducted. Sometimes they've seen reptilian-like creatures. Sometimes they've even seen the U.S. military, and that opens up a whole nother can of worms.
Right. Well, this gets us into an area I was hoping that you would open up, and I thank you for doing that, which is that, as we were saying before, when it looks like these reptilians are underground, all we have to look at is, and I study many, many works of ancient religions, including the modern religions, but the one we can most identify with is the Christian religion for the majority of people.
That's right.
And I will only say this, is that all you have to do is look at the reptilian in the Garden of Eden, and when he had interfered originally with the overall plans, God, Jehovah, or whatever, came down and said, you haven't behaved like I've told you, you've interfered. Now get thee underground. I will cast thee underground, and man's heel shall be upon your forehead, and you shall be at man's heel. In other words, they were cast underground. There are many ancient religions that talk about these reptilians being underground. Only one of them is the Hopi religion, where they talk about their ancestors not being human, but being snakes or reptilians. And they call them the snake people. And like we're coming full circle now from like the beginning of the show, the ant people and the snake people. They believe, according to their legends, that at the end of each great cycle, when these devastations happen, they're taken underground to safety by the ant people. And this area that they lived in was the underworld. And they finally came up after the devastation through a hole in the ceiling of this great underground cave or this underworld called the Sipapuni. Nobody has ever known where the Sipapuni is. And they've always thought of it as legend and myth.
In that case, John, this question may answer itself. It's from John in Seattle, Washington. Given their underground status as of now, how did they survive the catastrophe that wiped out all other higher reptile life forms millions of years ago? And that kind of answers itself, I guess.
Right. If there's something happening on the surface, the immediate response is to try and go underground, not only with our own government like they're doing now, but it's shown back in very medieval pictures, and it's even reported back in the times like the Velikovskian, theories of when they said that the great, the stars fell from heaven and the great earthquake. There's many depictions of people running for caves. If there was a more highly evolved form of intelligence in the age of the dinosaur, then perhaps their immediate instinct was to run for cover as well. Mm-hmm. When you start going underground, there are natural aquifers of fresh water traveling in great rivers in some cases. When this happens, it releases highly charged positive ions into the air, as well as releases a high content of oxygen. Mm-hmm. So you can live down in these areas. There's radium that lines the walls of some of these caves, which gives off a constant light. And there's also many other minerals within the earth itself that you could actually grow from. When this underground mythological Indian place, the Sipapuni, was said to be somewhere in the Four Corners area, they supposed. There was an article written by the Arizona Gazette, the Phoenix Gazette, back in 1909, where it talks about a man by the name of Kincaid traveling down the Colorado River on a skiff, and he had come across an underground city that was built into the walls of the Grand Canyon that was big enough for 50,000 people to live in.
Really?
And when I initially read this article, I started a 4-year search to see if this could possibly be. What I've discovered is that in many outlying areas of where they would have carried that same article, even in the Yuma Examiner where this, he apparently was, the microfilm is all there for every day except those 2 days that it was printed. So there's suspicion by omission.
John, this is also interesting because there have been reports, rumors, myths, whatever you want to call it, some of them fairly substantial, that there's something going on in the Grand Canyon, that some area of it has been cordoned off to the public. Nobody's allowed to go near it. Nobody knows what it is. Have you heard those reports?
Well, they justify it by saying it's just dangerous. However, I can tell you that, honestly, after 4 years of research, I have finally located that exact same location where Kincaid had walked into the cave and found the Egyptian mummies, the metal that nobody could explain where it came from, the hieroglyphics that looked like they were from central Yucatan but not, and the cat's eyes. And then, like I said, they said that there was enough room for 50,000 people to live in. But the question is this, is that if there were, in fact, 50,000 people in the Grand Canyon, there is no evidence on the surface of that area that 50,000 people ever walked that area.
Indeed.
So where in the world did they go? Now, I've recently been in touch with sightings regarding this, and we've talked about doing something on it, and other people off on the West Coast, because when I finally released the full impact of my discovery of this location, it has such implications to it that it has to be done very gingerly, especially when I carry a lot of respect for the Hopi Indians. And this being their mythological place of the emergence from the underworld, it needs to be treated very delicately. And we're currently in negotiations with certain elements on the West Coast to try and get that out on the most widely spread way that we can.
Wow. Do you remember the old movie Journey to the Center of the Earth? I'm sure you do.
Wasn't that great?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who is to know, but could there be portals somewhere on the Earth? Do you believe there are?
Yes.
That would lead, if not to the center of the Earth, very, very deeply into the Earth?
Absolutely. I believe that the Earth is like a human body in a way, that it has veins and arteries. And those veins and arteries are natural and unnatural caverns and tunnel systems. And there probably are some areas of the Earth that are more, highly concentrated with tunnel systems, such as the Four Corners Southwest area, Central America, and the Andes area of Chile and down south in South America. One of the greatest reptilian, you've heard these winged reptilians we hear about.
Yes.
The Draco, and then the non-winged. Well, one of the greatest winged reptilian religious symbols there has ever been, or deities, is that of Quetzalcoatl. And he was a very benevolent being that lived down in the Yucatan area and Mexico. And you're going to love this. This has got to do with a lot of my research. I know you're just probably going to jump off your seat. But revelations, when they talk about revelations, it means to reveal what was once hidden.
Yes.
And during these times, these things will be revealed, as will the reptilian life forms. Quetzalcoatl was the being that lived between 600 and 900 A.D. down in Mexico, and also the upper Yucatan. And like I said, he was very benevolent. He went into an area where the Aztecs were ripping hearts out of people, and he said, no. He said, just put some herbs up on the altar, and he taught them science. He was the one that the Mayans and the Aztecs attribute to teaching them the Mayan calendar, and we know the scientific, significance of that.
Oh, yes.
The astronomical calendar. But then also, there are many relations between him and what we know of as the Christ. As a matter of fact, some people, like the Mormons of today's religions, believe that Quetzalcoatl was Christ reincarnate because he was just so benevolent in a very violent area. Anyway, through my research, I've realized through studying ancient archaeology and architecture, like in the Art and Architecture of Ancient America by George Kubler,
yeah.
He says that the most ancient of all archaeological ruins that are circular in formation are the result of the presence of the cult of Quetzalcoatl. That being, Quetzalcoatl means the feathered serpent. the being of the feathered serpent.
Do you connect all this, John, to the incredible sightings going on in Mexico? And I might add,
Absolutely.
ongoing in Mexico. Hundreds of thousands of people are seeing them.
Absolutely. I have plans on going down to the First International UFO Congress in Mexico City in August and having the opportunity to talk down there regarding this, because I truly do believe that Mexico City is going to be the primary point of contact, because if the Mexican people have already started to be conditioned to the more prominent presence there of these craft, and information outside the United States, if it's real close to us, we have an ability to control it, especially since the governments are so close now with all the monies being passed back and forth and deals being made. But also it's easier to control the information if at first the people don't react properly or as expected. And when they do have this initial contact, if they react unexpectedly, then they can stop the information flow right away. As you've seen, they've been doing all along.
Well, they have. You're right. It's interesting, though. From those I've talked to who have been to Mexico and have investigated, they have found the Mexican people are actually beginning to get, I'm not going to say nonchalant, but they're beginning to be accustomed to seeing these things almost all the time.
Absolutely. And
that process is ongoing.
Oh yeah. And if they land there first, when finally they start reacting properly, or so that when we are finally able to see that they have been there and we don't see people running through the streets, then it'll help us react a little bit more calmly to the acceptance of their arrival. But also remember that Mexico City sits atop an ancient city of Mexico called Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was the initial city created by the Aztecs. And, of course, the ancient god of the Aztecs was Quetzalcoatl. Now, when Quetzalcoatl was done, this winged serpent being was done with all his divine work down there. He said, when he left, I will return one day and I will redeem my people, which is exactly the same promise as you've heard other religious deities throughout all Earth say.
Of course.
Right?
Yes.
So,
But I believe all religions must, as a basic tenet, have a past history and a future promise.
Right. Absolutely. For us to have hope.
Okay. John, I'm telling you, I've got so many faxes here, I could never get to them all. Here is one that says, Reptilian experience by a 10-year-old. The following abduction experience by my 10-year-old son had grays showing my son reptilians. Now, there's much too much. This is from Maui, Hawaii, and there's much too much for me to go into here. But with all of this contact and all of this interest, John, I'm going to ask that you again please give out the telephone number and address, would you?
Absolutely. I welcome anybody to send material to me or just send that $10, and I'll money order a check, and I'll send them a package of material. And the address is John Rhodes, that's RHODES, Post Office Box 50381, Henderson, Nevada, 89016-0381. And in case you didn't get the address, you can call the voicemail system. It has the address on it again for you, which is 702-391-3335. And just to let everybody know, I'm not one of these researchers out there that's untouchable or that you can't talk to. I more than welcome people to get me information or to share their experiences with me if they feel that there's something that they can contribute to expanding my idea of what's going on. And time allowing, I'll try and get back in touch with you.
All right.
And then, of course, we have the tape that's $10, and then just add $2 in shipping and handling in there if you want to start finding out for yourself and you'd rather keep that experience a little more quiet.
All right.
That self-hypnosis tape.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Rhodes. Hi.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hi.
Recently, about a year or so ago, in Northern California, extremely Northern California.
Where are you, sir?
I am calling from the Ozarks.
Okay.
But in extreme Northern California, actually Fort Smith area, there was a lot of land, off-road land, rugged terrain, that was made off limits to the public. And for one reason or another, I think one government agency made it off limits to protect another one for whatever they were doing. And the reason for this is what appeared to be forest rangers were heavily armed with shoulder-strap machine guns. Now, it made no sense at all, and I know they weren't looking for marijuana.
Well, that's not the reason to cordon it off. That is the amount of security to accomplish it. What do you think they were cordoning off?
I have no idea, but I know that they were not they were keeping it close under taps. Well, I mean, why in the world would they have shoulder-strap machine guns in the first place? And this, like I said, in extreme Northern California, up near the Oregon border.
All right. Well, I've got a fax here also, John, about Mount Shasta. There are a lot of stories about Mount Shasta.
Yes.
And are you familiar with the term Lemurians?
Yes, I am.
Is this a group who supposedly lives in or under Mount Shasta?
Well, from what I've been able to discover through my research and through the research of other people like Cherry Hinkle and Tal and the other names I mentioned before, that appears that Mount Shasta is a shared facility, like a neutral base, like almost a Switzerland, for many different races and beings. And that's why there's such a variety of different reports coming out of there of various different looking beings. As far as Lemuria and Mu and Atlantis, I do believe that, yes, I do believe that there were past continents and other words, past civilizations that were destroyed through their own cataclysms, and some of them did escape through the tunnel systems. Because these tunnel systems crisscross the world, not just here.
All right, fascinating. Hold on, John. Remember to get a copy of this program, which I can understand you might want. Call 1-800-917-4278. 1-800-917-4278. There is a lot of interest around what John Rhodes is discussing, the human-reptilian connection. Underground tunnels, bases, perhaps even civilizations. Back to it in a moment. John, a lot of people want to talk to you, so let me take a couple of calls very quickly.
Great, okay.
All the way out to Maui, Hawaii, you're on the air with John Rhodes. How are you doing?
Hi, John. Thank you very much for the excellent information. And, Art, thanks for a great program.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to mention that initially when I was listening to your show tonight, I was my guard was up and I started resisting the potential of having any connection with reptiles. But then I remembered an experience that my 10-year-old son had just a couple years ago, and I'll quote him on it. He, first of all, had experience, an alien abduction experience that described greys, entities with oval dark eyes, did not blink, etc. But what it is important is these entities showed Joshua, quote, bad aliens that had dark skin with many small bumps on them like a reptile. And the key point is the aliens said they did not fight them with weapons or try to destroy them, but they kept them at bay with their minds. My question is, has there been any other reports that reptilians are hostile, or are they more benevolent and friendly toward the human race?
All right.
Well, I believe that there are those that are benevolent, and I think there are those that are evil. It is the common law of nature, and it cannot be disregarded, that there's the positive and negative polarity of absolutely everything. Even an atom has a positive and negative pole to it. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about human nature as well as nature of a living life form, I think that we are able to fluctuate between the negative and the positive polarities of whether we want to be good or evil as a matter of free will. Just as there are some people who may live in foreign countries under a crazy dictator who support perhaps, public executions of large masses of people, there are those beings like Mother Teresa. And I think you bring up a very good point, and that point is this great deceit that we come into that everybody's worried about, is that we have to look within ourselves and know within ourselves exactly who or what we're looking at. They say, there's an old saying, is know thee by thy deeds. Know somebody by what they're doing, not by what they're saying or what they look like.
Well, it sounds like that man should personally communicate with you.
Oh yeah, I openly invite you to. I think there's a lot to learn between the two of us.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Rhodes. Where are you calling from, please?
Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yes, sir.
I've studied reptiles for many years, and one of the things about reptiles that's rather interesting is that the male's genitalia are located in most species, on both sides of the tail. There are two, and they have very unique shapes in such a manner that they will uniquely fit the female of that species and no other. There was a comment earlier about rape of abductees, and it seems to me that this would be one interesting way to try to validate those.
Well, that's an interesting point you're bringing up. I don't know the particulars of what you're talking about as regards to the sexual genitalia of the reptile as opposed to the human being. That's something that I haven't really looked into, so I couldn't give you an informative opinion on that.
Well, if for no other reason that most reptiles have two, that ought to be an interesting cross-check, and the fact that these things are very oddly shaped, very, very oddly shaped.
And probably quite popular.
And they would probably be very painful, as a matter of fact.
Well, I know that there are the reports of the forced rapes, and I'm not sure if there are different reptilians as far as different physical species of them. But then again, there's human differences of our own species, like you have the pygmy, and then you have the tall people of Africa, and then you have the albinos. So I'm not willing to say at this time as to whether they are just of one type.
All right, here's a facts for you. Yes, the primitive brain positioned on top of the human spinal cord has long been referred to as the reptilian brain by academics. This information is not news. The primitive human brain, often referred to as the reptilian brain, performs the usual and ordinary biological functions which are common with the reptile and higher vertebrates: breath, hunger, thirst, excretion, sex, and so forth. Would your guest not agree the great developmental divide between the reptile and the higher vertebrates is the affection of the parent for the young? The reptile and lower animal classes abandon the egg or young upon discharge. The reptile does not protect, feed, or care for its young. The higher vertebrates, beyond and above reptilian biological divide, care for the young in varying degrees.
God, that I couldn't have said it better myself. And that fax, the person that sent that fax in is right on target. This possibly explains the large amount of abductions with people where they're being made to hold the children. Because if it's in fact the case that they're looking at our affection for children, as they apparently are doing, through abductions where these ladies are made to hold the babies.
Yes, oh yes.
And then they sit back and watch, and they're really amazed at it, and they're just taking in everything they can.
I've heard many stories
This
like
would
that.
make total sense. It really would.
It really would.
And we got to remember that the reptiles, primarily people think of them as giving birth to an egg. Well, there's the reptile like the adder, the snake that's the adder, that actually gives birth to its young without the egg. So, I think that, whoever sent that fax in, please get in touch with me.
Well, the person sending the fax is named Don from Redmond, Washington, so be so notified, Don. He'd like to hear from you. On the wild card line, you're on the air with John Rhodes.
Yes, this is Michael in Wichita, Kansas.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
And I have like to hear your comment about blackouts in the coast, both coasts, and if that has anything to do with Project HARP that I've heard related to on your show before.
Okay, I would answer that. I think not. I don't know that for sure, but I don't think the blackouts relate to HARP. They occurred actually prior to HARP's beginning its activity, so I will leave that one there. First-time caller line, you're on the air with John Rhodes. Hi.
Hi, Art. Congratulations for a great show. This is New Orleans calling.
New Orleans, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Art, several weeks ago you had a UFO guest on that talked about UFOs, and he brought up a particular incident where the United States military had surrounded a downed craft, went on board, discovered that the occupants were reptilian-type occupants on board, and went in, apparently in alcove of this spaceship discovered human remains, human bones, and I was wondering if your guest had any knowledge of that incident or any similar incidents.
John?
Well, I don't have any knowledge of that particular incident. As far as reports of them having the remains of human beings on board, it's quite possible. I wouldn't say that they were the cause of that person's demise, but they could have been.
All right, I'm going to ask you about two. I'm going to give you two weird questions. You can ignore them if you like. We mentioned Journey to the Center of the Earth earlier. If you had an opportunity, John, to travel very, very deeply into the Earth, if you found a porthole that would take you there, would you go?
Yes. I would not go without deep prayer beforehand.
But you would go?
Yes.
The next question involves an Associated Press story a number of years ago that has always stuck with me. Somewhere in Scandinavia, I can't recall where it was, they drilled what they thought to be the deepest hole ever drilled by man. And maybe you can update me. They lowered microphones, sound microphones, into this hole. And they heard sounds of human agony and screaming and torture. Thousands of voices, or what appeared to be that. And they actually ran that on the Associated Press. Now, I remember the story and held it in my hand off the wire and talked about it. It was really weird. And then you never heard anything more about it. How deeply have we ever gone into the Earth? Do you know?
Well, I do know that according to RAND Corporation documents and the documents from DARPA and such agencies, they've said that there have been studies to actually build underground bases as far as 8,000 feet underground.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's quite a bit distance.
It sure is.
It appears from what I've been able to see that as far as tectonic plate shift and earthquakes, most earthquakes happen on a fairly shallow level. And there is a theory out that the deeper you go, it is safer for you to be. And that if anything did shift over you with the current technology, with the nuclear boring tunnel boring machines that they have, that you could just drill your way out. As far as the screams and everything.
Had you ever heard that report?
Yeah, I'd heard the report. I mean, did they drill through the ceiling of hell?
Well, that's the obvious implication.
Implication, sure. Right? And it could be maybe that everybody was imagining that that's what they were going to do.
Hmm.
So, and that's just what they heard. Maybe it was a collective, hypnosis of some sort.
Maybe it was.
Right.
Only thing about it was they claimed they had it on audio tape.
Well, I haven't heard it.
And I would love to. John,
yeah, I would too.
Hold on. We'll be right back to you. John, this has been so interesting. There's been so much response that A, we will have you back on Dreamland again, and B, I might think about having you on one Friday night, Saturday morning, if you have the time on the regular syndicated program.
That's the marathon program you have?
You can call it the marathon program,
I
guess. Yeah, 5 hours a night, that's right.
Yeah, It's great.
It is great. It's a lot of fun, and if you ever do you ever stay up late?
Well, I try not to, but I tend to be up at many times 2, 3 in the morning at my computer doing my research and writing.
I understand.
So I do enjoy your shows.
Okay, well then maybe one night we'll plan ahead, and on a Friday night, Saturday morning, you can go get a nap on Friday, and we'll do a show.
I think that could be possible.
It is fascinating, John, because of I think there's a natural human curiosity about what is below us. We almost know more about what is above us at this point than what is below us, don't we?
Yes, and it's been very difficult for researchers such as Tal and Cherry Hinkle and Bill Hamilton and the others to be able to put this word out about we have to start looking underneath our feet. I think the majority of the reason why it's been so hard to have other researchers in the field take it seriously as it should be taken is, number one, with the advent of video cameras, it's easy for us to start getting hooked on looking above our heads because it's just right there for us at times.
Sure.
And when it's underground, we really don't have anywhere to go with that other than to look at the logic and listen to the information that's being provided. Many of these installations and natural cavern systems are very inaccessible. The one, for example, in the Grand Canyon that I discovered is extremely dangerous to try and get to. And I wouldn't suggest that anybody should they find something like that, just go alone.
Don't try this.
Absolutely not.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Rhodes. Hi.
Yes, I'm calling from St. Louis.
St. Louis, yes, sir.
Yes, I have a friend of mine. I read a book once about underground caverns and stuff, and this one guy I was talking to here at work, he grew up in an area, I believe it's Creve Coeur, but there's a lot of caves out in that area, and he said that twice he's seen some odd-looking creatures out there around these particular caves, and he's offered many times to take me out there to the area where it was at. But he says he knows exactly where they were coming from. And he said the one night that he got the best look at them, he said that he had pulled off the side of the road in his car, because he was changing a flat tire.
Right.
And he said that with his brake lights, he's seen these two creatures. He said they were about 4 foot tall or something like that. He said they ran across one side of the road. He said they were like in this farmer's field. And he said they ran in like a kind of hobbling fashion. And he said they jumped, across the road over to these weeds on the other side toward the caves. And he said, with the brake lights, he could see them, And he said that one of them stuck his head up through the weeds, looking at him. And he said it was only like 40 feet away. And he said it had a large head and had large black eyes. So he said he jumped up and took off running, and left the car there,
I think I would, too.
Yeah, have the tow truck driver go get it.
That's
Yeah,
right.
but-
That's right.
But he's offered many times to take me, to the area where he said they're at. And also, I know another guy.
Sounds like you have not yet taken him up on that.
No, I didn't.
All right. Well, I don't blame you, sir. We don't have much time. We've got to run. John, given an opportunity to actually be abducted by some of the creatures that you suspect exist, or not be abducted, would you be curious enough to say, okay, take me, I'm out of here? Or would you be more tempted to run like hell?
I think it's one thing talking about an alien species. It's another thing looking at one eye to eye.
You betcha.
I mean, a lot of us don't understand that. We can give lip service to, oh, yeah, well, we're ready, you were ready, I'm ready, but when one's sitting there close enough for you to feel its breath upon your forehead
That's
because
right.
of its size
I agree.
and its muscular structure is so much more, much more profound than you could ever imagine. You feel so small and out of control that the first thing that goes is your knees. So, no, I wouldn't say that I'd be open for just anybody. I still feel that that's a violation. However, I believe that if we call upon our divine being within us during that time of an abduction, we can actually command in the name of that power within us for it to stop. I would not say that we're all victims. I think that many people, starting at childhood, give permission initially to be abducted because they have no fear and they have this great wonderment, as
All right.
children do.
Look, we're out of time. There's never enough time. Give out your address and phone number one more time.
Okay. If you'd like to receive a package of information concerning this, send $10, money order or check. And if you'd like to receive the self-hypnosis cassette for abductees, the same amount, please add $2 additional for shipping and handling to John Rhodes, that's R-H-O-D-E-S, Post Office Box 50381, Henderson, Nevada, 89016-0381. And if you need that address again, just call the voicemail. That's area code 702-391-3335. And I'd like to take this opportunity to really thank you very much for all the great work that you've been doing through all the years. You really have stepped out on a limb when you first started coming out with this information, Art, and you've actually created waves that have felt repercussions not only locally, nationally, and internationally, but I'm sure dimensionally as well.
John,
You will be remembered.
Thank you. I live on limbs. John Rhodes, we'll have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Art.
Take care. Remember, our bulletin board number is area code 702-727-1709. To get a tape of this or any other program, call 1-800-917-4278. From the high desert adjacent to Dreamland, good night. This has been Dreamland, a program dedicated to an examination of areas in the human experience not easily nor neatly put in a box. Things seen at the edge of vision, awakening a part of the mind as yet not mapped. Yet things every bit as real as the air we breathe but don't see. Please join us again next week at this time for Dreamland. Well, you've just heard 2 hours of an absolute classic. We are going to do a material follow-up and a program follow-up. Coming up in a moment is David Icke. Not Icky, but Icke. It's I-C-K-E, and I can understand how people get confused. We'll talk to David about that in a moment, and I think you're going to enjoy what lies ahead, so once again, don't touch that dial. All right, let me tell you a little bit about David Icke, and it is Icke, not Icky. He's billed as the most controversial and challenging man in Britain. He speaks openly about issues that others fear discussing. He exposes the lies and deceit of thousands of years and reveals the biggest secret, how humanity has been controlled and manipulated since prehistory by extraterrestrial gods, small g, and the secret society network they created and continue to orchestrate today. In this profusely illustrated presentation, he exposes an astonishing web of interconnected manipulation to reveal that the same few people, secret societies, organizations control the daily direction of our lives. They engineer wars, terrorist outrages, political assassinations, control the world market in hard drugs, the media indoctrination machine. He reveals how religions, politics, banking, and business have been designed from the beginning to control and suppress human potential in pursuit of long-term agendas. The mental, emotional, and spiritual enslavement of the human race. He shows how spiritual and scientific knowledge has been hoarded in the hands of the few since ancient times, while being systematically withdrawn from public circulation. Oh my, that's quite an introduction. Here is David Icke. David, welcome.
Thank you. Well, yeah, that should fill a nice 3 hours, shouldn't it, really?
It certainly will. David, your last name is spelled I-C-K-E, and in the last couple of weeks since I've been sort of mentioning that you're going to be around, I've heard other people say Icky, and I fell into the same rut and said Icky. Nobody would pronounce their name Icky. But when you were a child, David, based on how it's spelled here, did you have a rough time with this one?
No. They called me Ike.
They called you Ike?
Yeah. I mean, you don't pronounce the C. Actually, funny enough, I had a friend, his name was Bill Shufflebottom, and I said to him once, "Have you ever thought of changing your name?" He said, "Yeah." I said, I was going to call myself Charlie Shuttlebottom at one time, he said, but I never got around to it, So, what's in a name and all that?
Well, children in Britain are obviously much more kind-hearted, not so mean-spirited.
Oh, no, they're just the same. They're the same the world over. But,
are they? So they never called you Icky?
Not that I recall.
All right. Anyway, I just sort of read a broad outline of the incredible road we're about to go down.
Uh-huh.
How did you come to all of this, I think, would be the proper first question.
Well, it's like everything. It's a journey. I started out life as a professional soccer player in England when I left school back in the late 60s.
A professional
soccer player, yeah. I was a goalkeeper. Yeah, they used to call me Cinderella because I kept missing the ball, But
no kidding. I actually came to love soccer. I went to France during Coupe du Monde, and I had never been exposed to soccer, and I saw the English game playing Argentina, and it was astounding. I sat in my hotel room in Paris and I watched that, and I became a soccer fan. Boom.
Yeah, well, I was doing that, back in the 60s, but arthritis finished my career when I was 21 and became a journalist and worked for newspapers and radio, and eventually became a frontline television link man with the BBC. And towards the end of the 80s, however, in fact earlier than that, I started looking at the world and what was going on, and didn't like what I saw. And towards the end of the 80s, more in the very early 90s, I went through what you might call I guess, a spiritual awakening. It was more like an explosion. Not religious, by the way. God save us from religion. A spiritual awakening when I started to realize that there was far more to life and the human entity and who we were and the power that we had than ever we were told, because we're given this choice, basically, between a judgmental God and if you listen to this guy in a long frock, he'll tell you what God wants, and so listen to me and you'll be fine. And on the other side, what we laughingly call science, which basically says this world is all there is, and we're all a cosmic accident. And it's quite a choice to make, you know. Am I subject to some judgmental God, or am I a cosmic accident? And I started to realize that there was far more evidence available that was being suppressed in the public arena. And so I started on this journey of uncovering this suppression, and it was a trickle to start with, and as the 90s have unfolded, I've been in over 20 countries in the last 18 months talking and researching, because if you're doing this job, you've got to listen as much as you talk, or you don't pick up the evidence and the information that's available. And the suppression of what you might call spiritual information became the suppression of political information, the suppression of how a very few people control this world through a series of interconnecting pyramids in which most people in those pyramids haven't got a clue what's going on. You know, people say it's the Freemasons. Well, you know, I've got a lot of friends who are Freemasons, and they are completely in the dark about what's going on. It's not the Freemasons. It's not the Jews. It's not the anyone. It's an organization that works through all of these apparently uncontrolled areas of life and manipulates to a particular and very long-term agenda, a great point in which we're now facing as this 20th century comes to a close. And it's an organization within all organizations, not the Freemasons or whatever. They work through all these different organizations. And so it's been a journey, and getting the information now is no longer a problem. It's a tidal wave, because once you put your head above the trench with this, you attract people in with information who don't know what to do with it or are frightened to put it out themselves. The challenge I have is not gathering information, it's fitting the picture together and seeing how the pieces fit together and how that affects what's coming up now across the millennium, because this is a particular time when a lot of cards are going to be played to put the human race into a position of even greater mental and emotional imprisonment than we've been thus far.
At the beginning of all this, you suggest, right at the beginning of what I read, that humanity has been controlled and manipulated since prehistory by extraterrestrial gods and the secret society network they created and continue to orchestrate. What proof do you have of that, or what convinced you might be a better question?
Well, to see the scale of the evidence, people have to read the books that I write, which are lengthy and detailed, and this particular one's coming out, The Biggest Secret, in the new year, in February. Because what I do is I take vast amounts of information from different sources, and I look for the key common themes. I look for the cross-references. I look for the common things that keep coming up that push you in a certain direction. I don't follow a belief system. I follow information. I let the information be my guide to where I go, not preconceived ideas. And when you fit the information together from vast numbers of sources, you can pick up in the ancient world basically the kind of areas where Zecharia Sitchin talks about, and others too, not just him, about this Anunnaki and the hybrid race that was created, this Anunnaki stroke human hybrid race. And then you look at the Book of Enoch, which is just a version of a much older book, the Book of Noah. And it talks there about the Watchers and how the Watchers, which for me and many others when they read it, are clearly an advanced race of probably not of this world who were around at that time. And that talks too about how the Watchers interbred with humanity. You look at other ancient texts, it actually describes the birth of these hybrid children in very common terms, common theme terms, them being very white with white hair and with shining eyes, as one said, eyes that shine like the sun. And this hybrid race, lots of people increasingly, and I'm sure, I've no doubt, people have talked about this who've specialized in this particular area on your program. The question is what happened? Because what you get with most of this research is it kind of stops, and that's the end of it. What I've done is, well, what happens here? What happened to these people? And what's fascinating is that you can pick up a white race, an Aryan race, in that very kind of area that these Sumerian texts and other ancient texts talk about. And I'm talking about the mountains of Kurdistan, of Iran, of the Caucasus Mountains area, of what we now call Turkey. And it's interesting that the word for white people that Americans have is Caucasian. The Caucasian after mountains in the Near East. And then you can pick this race up. You can see how it came down into the plains of Sumer, down into Babylon, which was a major place in the journey through history of these bloodlines that I talk about that run the world to this day. They also moved into Egypt, and then you can follow as the centuries unfolded. This same white race across land, and they changed their names from various times. They were the Sumerians, they were the Scythians. And if you follow them across the land into what we now call Western Europe, into France, into what we call Belgium, Holland, into Germany, they changed their names as the centuries unfolded, but you can follow the flow of people, and you can see that actually it's the same people. So out of this Middle East area where this interbreeding went on came the white races that peopled Europe. There's also some tremendous research I've come across and documented in this next book that shows that a group of people, a race of people called the Phoenicians, went by sea from this same Middle East, Near East area to Britain. 3000 BC. There are standing stones in Britain that confirm this as well as other things. And when you look at the British culture, which became the Western culture, it was actually the Phoenician culture. The two deities that the Phoenicians worshipped were Barat and Barati. And Barat and Barati became Baritan and Baritania. When you look at the way the ancient Phoenicians depicted their goddess Barati, it was precisely the way the British depict their goddess Britannia. Then you look at even conventional history of how the Hindu religion was created and how the advanced civilization in the Indus Valley was created. And it was created by an Aryan race coming out of the Caucasus Mountains area and taking the Sanskrit language, which we now believe was originally Indian, but actually came with this same group. They also took in the stories that became the ancient Vedas. And so you can see that this white race, which very demonstrably has taken over the world en masse, but there are key bloodlines manipulating it that people don't realize, actually came out of this area where this hybrid extraterrestrial stroke human, these bloodlines were created, and peopled Europe. Now, when you do the research, you find that the genealogical research, you find that key bloodlines became the kings and the divine right of kings, again, by bloodline, of these countries like Iran and that area and Egypt. And then you can also see that the aristocracy and royal families of Europe, which is actually the royal family of Europe when you look at it, it's one tribe, not actually a number of families. They became the aristocracy and they became the royal families of Europe. Now, through the great so-called British Empire, which we can get into later because it's fundamental to how these bloodlines were transported around the world, these bloodlines went to the Americas. They went to Australia, to Africa, to Asia, to New Zealand. They went all over the world through the British and European expansion known as the empires. And then you do the research of the people that have run America since 1776. And it's astonishing. We've had 42 presidents so far of the United States. 33 of those 42 are genetically related to England's King Alfred the Great and Charlemagne, the great monarch of France. 19 are genetically related to England's King Edward III, who has thousands of blood connections to Prince Charles. And a stunning statistic from Burke's Peerage, which is the aristocratic genealogical Bible based in Britain, which is that since the first presidential election in America in, 1789, George Washington, the winner at every election has been the candidate with the most British and European royal genes. You look at Bill Clinton. The state of Arkansas.
David.
Bill Clinton is genetically related to the House of Windsor, the present royal family. He's genetically related to every Scottish monarch,
David,
to England's King Henry III, and to Robert I of France.
David, one could imagine this genealogy having connections in the early presidents. No question about it.
Mm-hmm.
But as late as Bill Clinton?
As late as Bill Clinton. I mean, I'm not plucking this out of the air. This has come from Burke's Peerage, the Bible of aristocratic genealogy on the planet.
All right, hold on, David. We're at the bottom of the hour, and we'll be right back. One can imagine the early connection, but today, this is Coast to Coast AM. Good morning, everybody. Great to be here. David Icke is my guest, and we are talking about a very wide and long conspiracy indeed. One might imagine the gene pool was rather small in the beginning, back in George Washington's day, but as the gene pool widened, for the statistics to remain, as David has suggested, almost impossible, or orchestrated. Believe as you will. We'll get back to him in a moment. All right, back now to David Icke. David, this is amazing what you're laying out for us. The implications are that there, I guess, is a secret pool of knowledge that has been passed down among those with the right lineage. Am I getting that about right?
Yeah, I mean, people need to ask themselves why the Eastern establishment of the United States interbreeds as obsessively as the royal families and the aristocratic families of Europe have always done. You take, for instance, George Bush.
Yes.
George Bush and Barbara Bush are the same bloodline. They go back to the Pierce bloodline, which is actually the Percy bloodline. They changed from Percy to Pierce when they crossed the Atlantic, which is an aristocratic family going way back in England. And so this obsessive interbreeding is not, as we've been led to believe, genetic snobbery. It's because they're trying to hold a genetic structure. And the stunning detail with which they keep these records of these lineages is unbelievable, really. And therefore, there is something which we need to establish, which is very, very important to these people, to do with the genetics and the blood. And it also connects into this thing the Nazis talked about. Indeed, not just the Nazis, but other people like Lord Bulwer-Lytton in his book, The Coming Race. Again, he was part of the genetic bloodlines too, an English guy, where they talked about the vril power in the blood that created, quote, supermen. And this obsession with the genetics of the body and holding that genetic structure, it's to do with what it gives them and what powers it gives them. And they, of course, this has got dissipated in some of these lines. Of course it has. But there are key lines that they have obsessively held as pure, quote, as they possibly can, from how they started back in the ancient world when they had this extraterrestrial intervention. And it's amazing when you follow these bloodlines, just very quickly, Art, that when you follow them, you find that people who are running the banking system, who are running the transnational corporations, who end up at the top in politics, who are big people in the media, the people who are at the top in these secret society pyramids. I mean, I'll give you just a very quick example of how obsessive it is. Contact of mine, a brilliant contact who's proved to be accurate, stunningly so, time and time again over the last 2 years. He's got a close friend who was approached by an American government agency to courier drugs for them. And he was kind of taken aback by this, and he said, well, basically, no, but what the heck are you asking me for? And to his astonishment, the reply came, we know what your bloodline is. And this bloodline, I cannot emphasize enough, is so important to these people. And if anyone out there can give me more information on exactly why this obsession is there and what powers it gives them, I'll be delighted to hear from them.
Okay, here's something I want to understand. You said genetic intervention. I've heard this from many, many people, Zachariah Sitchin and forward. Mm-hmm. Now, this genetic intervention early on, was this what took the early caveman, the early, at some stage, to the modern intelligent human being that we now know? Is that the change for all of humanity, and were there special changes in certain human beings then?
It's a very interesting question, and I don't think we can be definite on that, going that far back. When you look at the Sumerian text, they do remarkably describe what we would call test tube babies, creation of humans through test tubes and what have you, which, given that they were found in the middle of the last century and were buried something like 2000 BC, was absolutely astonishing, as many other things in the text are, particularly about astronomy and the planets and the solar system, which have only been confirmed in relatively very recent times. But in terms of the time scale and the scale of the intervention in terms of its effect on the human race in general, I'm still kind of open-minded about that. What is
But I mean, the implications of what you're saying are that there was more than one intervention, or that...
That's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point. For me, there's been more than one intervention at different times. I think that if you go back and you look at the estimates that people like Sitchin put on it, that this Anunnaki arrived maybe around 450,000 years ago, I wouldn't dismiss or argue with that. I think that's not a bad time scale when this thing possibly started. But another thing that I've looked at in my books, and particularly in great detail in this next one, is that the evidence for not just one major cataclysm on this earth, but a number in the window of 13,000 years ago and much more recently. The evidence is phenomenal, not just in the geological and biological record, but also in the endless records and accounts and oral traditions all over the world in all the different cultures. And I think that one of the key areas, the key times for the intervention that created these particular, what I will call royal bloodlines, because interestingly, the Sumerian texts talk about the fact that the Anunnaki created what they called Anuship, kingship. In other words, almost a middleman group of bloodlines that were the middle controllers between the extraterrestrials and the mass of the human race.
All right, then may we think of ourselves as an ant colony? In other words, there are worker ants. There are various levels of ants to the queen. And isn't that kind of what you're saying was done to the human race? They created a genetic strain of workers, which Sitchin believes. He believes, I think, to mine gold. Yeah,
I have many questions about that area, I must say. But I take your point, and it's not a bad summary. What I feel is, however, is this, and this is the positive side that we've really got to get our heads around across this millennium. The human race is not ordinary, and it's not powerless. But if you are a relative handful of people, and you want to control a mass of the people,
yes,
you cannot do it physically. This manipulation is not physical. There's not enough people. If you try to control a herd of sheep physically, you need 4 or 5 guys, maybe more, chasing each sheep.
You bet.
But it's not done like that with a herd or a flock of sheep. Most of them follow the one in front without question. And the others, the stragglers that don't immediately conform to that bar mentality, they are given the dose of the four-letter word that controls this world, fear, through the sheepdog, and then most of them, if not all of them, come into line. So what we're looking at is a mental and emotional manipulation that has bombarded, and the creation of religions, the major religions and others, has been fundamental in this. And again, look where all the major religions came out of, this same area of the world: Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, out of the Caucasus Mountains I talked about earlier, Islam. All these major religions came from this same area of the world that this initial operation appears to have taken place in. And what I feel is that the key intervention was after the last cataclysm. It's interesting that when you look at the evidence of where agriculture started in the known world, it was at heights above 10,000 feet, which absolutely fits with the fact that there was some kind of massive flood or flow of water. In those mountains that I'm talking about, that area of the Middle and particularly the Near East, that mountainous area, the Caucasus, what we call Turkey, Iran, all that area.
Yes.
That's, for me, the evidence that I put in some considerable detail in this next book, where this key intervention took place that created these particular bloodlines. When the waters then started to recede down from these mountains into the valleys of and the plains of Sumer, Babylon, Egypt, came these people. Now, there were two levels of knowledge. There was the advanced knowledge, which the extraterrestrials and their hybrids had access to, and there was the rest of the people. And what happened, it seems, when you talk to many researchers into this area, is that the mystery schools were set up, some of them very positive, to pass on some advanced information to people they considered were worthy and would use it positively. But as the years passed, this mystery school network was infiltrated, and indeed a negative mirror of it was created. And therefore, instead of passing on this advanced information, which was clearly available, I mean, look at the pyramids. Look at some of the great structures of the ancient world. The one at Baalbek in the Lebanon, which involved moving 3 chunks of stone, each of which were 800 tons, at least a third of a mile, and putting them high up in a wall. I mean, our primitive people are going to do that. So we only got to look at what the ancient world has left us around the planet to see that there was very advanced knowledge there. You look at the way that the ancient structures and the stone circles are phenomenally connected to star systems, to natural cycles, to the precession of the equinoxes. There was advanced knowledge in the ancient world. What happened is that this was sucked in as the years passed into this mystery school and later secret society network, and was passed on at the highest level only to those
David?
that were given or were chosen to have it.
David, was this a physical science or a mental science?
I think it was absolutely both. You know, some of the information that's now coming to light in shows like yours and others, where we're seeing the true nature of what is possible beyond what we call science, which is actually not science at all, most of it. It's not about open-minded research. It's about defending a belief system and a dogma. And this stuff that's now emerging actually is re-emerging into the public domain at this tremendous time of transformation that's happening now and is going to advance very much across the millennium and into the first 10 years or so of the next century.
Are you aware of an organization called PsyCop?
Yeah.
The Skeptical Inquirer?
Well, I've actually talked about them. It's quite interesting in this next book, The Biggest Secret.
Oh, have you really?
Yes, it is amazing how they cross-reference a number of their personnel with mind control operations. If anyone wants to read about that, then it'll be available, and the names will be named in the new year.
No kidding.
It's very interesting how you've got an organization which is suppressing and trying to get people not to look at information and dismiss it, are also involved in some other areas that, say the least, are extremely questionable. Well, and I reveal some of the background to this organization in my next book, and people ought to know that before they go the way of dismissing information just because it's being ridiculed by these people.
This coming Friday, they're giving me in Los Angeles this special honor they call the Snuffed Candle Award. They say they're giving it to Art Bell. The less than prestigious award, the Snuffed Candle Award, for encouraging credulity, presenting pseudoscience as genuine, and contributing to the public's lack of understanding of the methods of scientific inquiry.
Right. Well, I tell you what, I wouldn't buy a used car or a new one off any of them, and people will see why when they read the next book. I think if anyone who gets an honor from this group of that kind should actually take it as an honor, because there are some people, when they're on your side, you know you're on the wrong one, and Psychops is certainly one of them.
No, I'm accepting it in that spirit.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. So the pressure, and this is a good example. If you are going to control vast numbers of people, you have to delink them from knowledge that you're doing it, and you have to delink them from an understanding of their true power. You have to persuade them that they are ordinary, that they are powerless, they are pawns in a game, because then they won't realize that if they just realized who they are, there would be no game. One of the techniques, there are many techniques that you can pick up if you follow these bloodlines across the century, right into the modern world, of how people are mass manipulated by techniques that just go on being repeated and repeated and repeated. And we can see them happening daily now as we enter this crucial period across the millennium when lots of cards are going to be played.
Give me some examples of control, for example, through the modern media.
Well, let me outline the most powerful, the most used, and the most effective. And I think this actually will apply very much to some of the UFO stuff that's going on.
Sure.
It's a technique that I've called in my books problem, reaction, solution. You start with something you want to introduce. Say you want to give more power to the police, you want to have more power to stop and search, more power to tap phones, or you want politicians to have more power to bring in a certain policy.
Sure.
You know that if you introduce that policy honestly and say, right, we're going to do this, there would be a mass reaction because people would say, excuse me, over here, that's a fascist state you're trying to introduce here. We're not having this.
Yeah, what about our Bill of Rights?
So what you do is you create a problem. It could be a terrorist bomb. It could, like Oklahoma, it could be a run on a currency, a government collapse, Y2K, whatever. And you create a problem. People then react to that problem, and you encourage them through the media to say, this can't go on. Something must be done. What are they going to do about it? And at that point, they, who have covertly created the problem but got someone else to be blamed for it, glean that reaction, do something, then openly offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves created. Problem, reaction, solution. So if you want more power to the police, more stop and search, more draconian laws, then and you want people not just not to oppose it, but to demand you do it, then you let society break down so there is more crime.
Sure, you don't even have to actually suggest it. You just create the situation and the public comes to you demanding that you change it.
Exactly. And if we just apply this to the UFO situation. Now, as we've discussed already, I have absolutely no problem with an extraterrestrial aspect to all this, certainly not. But what I would say is the, quote, aliens aren't coming. They've been here for thousands of years working through these bloodlines and through other means. And when you look at the way that the human consciousness is being prepared, you first of all look through Hollywood. Hollywood's one of the great homes of mind conditioning. Wherever I go in the world, the Hollywood films are playing, the Hollywood videos are available, all over the world. And then you look at things, the patterns that are emerging. You look at Independence Day, made by 20th Century Fox, owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is owned by this brotherhood. You look at Alien Resurrection, made by 20th Century Fox, owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is owned by this Brotherhood. You look at X-Files, which is made by Fox Television, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is owned by this Brotherhood. And if you're looking at problem, reaction, solution in regard to this extraterrestrial situation, then look back at the report from Iron Mountain, which was produced between 63 and 66, a report with 15 experts in various fields asked to produce ways of centralizing power and controlling the population without further recourse to global wars.
All right, David, hold it there. We're at the top of the hour. When we get back, I'm going to ask you about me, because I've got the largest program on radio dealing with this kind of thing, and I wonder if I'm part of it. Certainly, there's been plenty of accusation about that, and at times I've wondered, could I be a pawn? This is Coast to Coast AM. David Icke is here. We'll be right back. Once again, here I am. David Icke is my guest, and he kind of laid it out, this lineage, this control, Hollywood, the media, Independence Day, the X-Files, and he stopped just short of me. In a moment, we're going to ask about me. I don't think that I've ever told my audience this, but my lineage, my family lineage, can actually be traced back to my family my family came over on the Mayflower. It was one of the original families. Now, having said that, I'm going to read David a fax, and then we're going to see where we are here. The fax comes from British Columbia. We're heard throughout the Americas, and this is BC. Comes from Corey. Art, I need you to ask David a question. I met David in Aruba at a summer conference in June. Were you in Aruba in June, David?
Mm-hmm.
He goes on, David was signing his books at his table with many around him. I had a chance to ask him if he'd ever heard of Art Bell and why he'd never been on your program. He told me the only reason he'd never been invited on your program was because you, Art Bell, are a 33rd degree Mason and would not want to be exposed on national radio. My question for David is whether he still believes you are a part of the higher elite Masons. Maybe you have this bloodline. David?
Well, I have absolutely no evidence that you're a 33rd degree Freemason, so I wouldn't suggest that you're a 33rd degree Freemason. If you're asking me about your show, I think it's...
Did you give that answer to this man? Do you recall that?
Well, I have no evidence that you're a 33rd degree Freemason, so why would I say that? I take it you're not a Freemason.
Well, I'm frequently asked if I am, and I get so sick of the question. I'm asked if I'm CIA, NSA, and all the rest of it. Uh-huh. I just say sure, and that seems to stop them cold, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know what to say, and it stops them, and that's the easiest way to do it. Denial seems to go nowhere. It just reinforces their preconception of what I was. So I've given up answering no. I just say sure. Sure.
Right. Well, in terms of programs like this or any other, it's very important that anyone listening to these shows, including listening to what I say, filter the information and ask themselves whether it feels right to them. Ask themselves a question that I filter information with all the time, which is who benefits from me from believing this? If I believe this, is it positive? Or if I believe this, is it a problem, reaction, solution situation or whatever?
But how do you delineate between me and the X-Files or Independence Day or anything else? I mean, here I am, now owned by one of the largest broadcasting corporations in America, J-Corp, which is now owned by a larger corporation, maybe soon the largest in the world, Clear Channel, and Premier and all the rest of it, and I'm a part of this giant corporate conglomerate. But I'm sitting here in my little room doing the program like I always did. No change. I've been doing it for 14 years now, David.
Right. Well, let's look at the way this thing works. If large numbers of people realized this was going on, it couldn't work. So what it's structured as is a series of pyramids. If you think of pyramids as like Russian dolls, one inside another, a bank is a pyramid. Most people working for a bank, you meet them across the counter every day. They're just going in, they're earning a living, and then they're going home. And they're just thinking about their families. They've not got a clue what they're part of. But at the top of that pyramid in that bank, you've got a tiny, tiny few people who know what the real agenda of that bank is. They know how all the different contributions lower down the pyramid fit together to create a direction, to create an agenda, etc.
So
the individual parts do not.
Then, David, could I be an unwitting dupe?
Well, we all could be unwitting dupes. This is the question we keep having to ask ourselves. If you look at the media, I was a journalist for a very long time. People say the media is manipulating. It is, but the vast, vast, overwhelming majority of journalists are not knowingly manipulating anyone. They're part of a structure in which they themselves are being manipulated. You only need a very few people in this structure who know what's really going on to manipulate the whole pyramid.
Well, I have no illusions about what I am, David. I am a talk show host. I am not a journalist. Big difference.
No, I don't think there is a difference. Any situation where you have access to broadcast to the public, you are a channel of communication of information. And therefore, we all of us, whether we're journalists or whether we call ourselves talk show hosts or researchers or whatever, have a duty to do whatever we can to ensure the information that hits the public is not disinformation, is actually as true as we can establish it, or at least give people the opportunity to make their own mind up. If you look at the journalistic profession, and you look at most reports in the news, where are they getting their information from? They're saying things like, White House sources say this, FBI sources say this. Most of the journalistic profession is merely a voice piece and a copy typist for the official version of events.
Quite right.
And the way the journalism is structured, someone has to be an expert on a different subject every day, and tomorrow it's a different subject. Now, people in that situation, which is what most journalists are in, are actually, therefore, at the mercy of what people tell them is true, and this is overwhelmingly official sources. So I had asked people, watch a CNN news bulletin, watch any news bulletin, and listen to the words and listen to the sources. And basically, news bulletins are official voice pieces for the official version of events. Now, what also happens, and this is all part of the manipulation that goes back a long time, all you have to do to control the direction of the world, control the direction of people's thinking, and set the point of reference from which the media reports the world is to set the norms in society. To set what people are conditioned to believe is right or wrong, possible or impossible, sane or insane, etc. Most people will live their lives within those norms, that hassle-free zone, as I call it, that comfort zone. And most of the rest who realize that the norms are flawed will still live their life within them because they fear the consequences of being different in a world of uniformity, because it becomes a hassle to be different in this world.
Well, I will give you this. I have had great contact with the mass media right at the top, and I can tell you this. When the Associated Press runs a wire story, it's like the Holy Grail. And then the rest of the media will grab the story, and they have a certain angle with which they want to tell this story. And God help anybody who gets in the way of that angle with a fact that disputes it. It doesn't happen. It comes out the way they want it to come out. I know that to be true.
That's precisely the way it works. I mean, you sit in a newsroom, and I've sat in many, and people get journalists, they read the morning papers. They've got CNN permanently on. They've got the wires, which you talk about, giving the basically the official version of events.
Yes.
And you look at what happened to that guy on the San Jose Mercury when he and that paper had the guts to come out with the expose of how government agencies put crack cocaine onto the streets of Los Angeles.
They were stepped on.
They were hit by a tidal wave. And where did a lot of that tidal wave come from? It came from the Los Angeles Times, and it came from the Washington Post, and it came from the official, controlled, in terms of those major newspapers, media sources. And so, again, let's look at the situation in summary here. You've got the education system, which is battering children from a very early age with an official version of life. You've got the media that's pounding out the official version of life. And someone said to me once, that summed it up, they said, you know, when you're born to loving parents, and they tell you that 2 and 2 equals 5, and then you go to your first school and nice teachers tell you 2 and 2 equals 5, then you go to university and professors with lots of letters after their name tell you 2 and 2 equals 5. All your peers are telling you the same because they've been through the same system. You pick up a newspaper or turn on the television and you're being told 2 and 2 equals 5. Is it any wonder that most people go through their entire lives, symbolically believing 2 and 2 equals 5? In other words, the official version of life is the only version there is. Mm-hmm. And delinking people from the spiritual information of the true power that we have to control our own destiny has been fundamental to this. Believing that we have to look to someone else to do it for us, that we're powerless, that we're just a cosmic accident, or we're subject to some judgmental God. In other words, we are just little people and we have no power. Once you get people in that mentality, they are a manipulator's party trick. And most people are in that mentality, and it's not by accident, it's by design. And when you, again, look at the cross-referencing of people in education opinion formers, in banking, in all these different apparently unconnected areas, they keep fitting into the same people and the same network of organizations which coordinate through these apparently unconnected areas of our lives the same basic policy. And this is why throughout the last, particularly 200 years, but this century overwhelmingly, just look at any area of our lives, politics, banking, business, media, the power in all those areas has incessantly gone into fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer hands, and this fits with the agenda, which is to create a world government, which nation-states would be nothing more than administrative areas to, a world central bank, a world currency, which would be electronic and not cash, for which there are fundamental implications for freedom,
well, we're on
a world army, and a microchip population.
Yeah, we're on the way to that now. With regard to the economy, we're about 3/4 of the way there right now.
We are, absolutely. And as we enter or head towards this key point in this agenda's journey through history, this millennium period, we are going to see, and we are seeing, lots of cards being played to create chaos. Chaos offers the ability or the opportunity to present order out of that chaos. What you do when you create chaos is you get people to say, do something. We're back to problem, reaction, solution, and you offer your solution to the chaos. And the solution to the chaos that is being planned in the months ahead and across the millennium is for a world government, a world army, which is designed to be NATO. And my earlier books predicted that NATO would expand into the former Soviet Union, that the European Union, which is now going to a single bank, central bank, and a single currency throughout the whole of Europe, would encompass the former Soviet Union countries. These are happening now. And the more wars, the more computer chaos, the more the aliens are coming, save us from it, the more that can be pounded into the public domain, the more the consciousness screams, do something, save us, and then the opportunity is there to offer the solution, and that's the agenda unfolding. And what I was saying earlier about the report from Iron Mountain fits magnificently with what's happening now. Two of the things that report suggested in the 1960s was A, to centralize power and control the population without wars, a global threat to the environment. And that card has demonstrably been played, because 2 years after the report from Iron Mountain reported, 66, came the Club of Rome, 1968. Henry Kissinger, Rockefeller, Giovanni Agnelli, a major player in Italy, operation. And when you look at all the major global environmental reports through the 70s and the 80s saying there is a global environmental problem, something must be done. They were all fronted and funded by the very people who are dismantling this world's ecology. The first head of the UN Environment Agency was Maurice Strong, a Canadian oil millionaire who's now an advisor to Kofi Annan, the UN Secretary General. The Global 2000 report to the President at the end of the Carter administration. Again, the personnel there, like Cyrus Vance, were connected to all this network of organizations. And the first head of the main head of the 1992 Earth Summit in Brazil, Maurice Strong, again, very much connected into the Rockefeller network. So the environment card has created tremendous opportunities for transnational global laws, and now, and many people in America are beginning to see this now, for great chunks of America and other parts of the world to be handed over to the United Nations to save the environment. Another thing that I expose massively in my next book is the way the Worldwide Fund for Nature has been used to create tremendous manipulation and conflict in Africa. And that, of course, is headed by Prince Philip, of which there is a great deal to know. So the environment suggestion in the report from Iron Mountain in the 60s has demonstrably been played in the 70s and the 80s. And also in that report it suggested, as a way of controlling the population and centralizing power, a threat from an extraterrestrial force. I would suggest, and a number of other people are beginning to come to the same conclusion.
Are you aware
that is now being played?
That Ronald Reagan, any number of times during his administration, sort of gave us a what if the world had band together to fight some extraterrestrial force or somebody from space. I'm sure you're well aware of what he said.
Yes, I am. And, of course, Ronald Reagan didn't move his lips without the autocue was running, symbolically or otherwise. So he said it because he was meant to say it. And I have an interesting quote here, Art, actually, which was apparently written down by a Swiss delegate at a Bilderberg meeting in France in 1994, Bilderberg being one of the network of coordinating organizations.
Oh, yes.
And the quote is alleged to come from Henry Kissinger. Now, whether this is 100% accurate or not, it magnificently sums up the situation. What Kissinger is alleged to have said is this: today, America would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government. And what we're seeing now with Iraq, with Kosovo and Bosnia that went before, and these other situations where NATO, etc., is being drawn in to set the precedent of being a world army and a world police force, is problems created so the solution can be offered, and the solution is more and more power and more precedent set for NATO to become the world army it's designed to be.
As a matter of fact, we're on the eve, apparently, of stomping back into Iraq with cruise missiles, at the very least, it would seem.
Well, one of the things that I document in great detail in my last book, And the Truth Shall Set You Free, is how and other people have done this too with excellent research, is how the two world wars, never mind the one in Iraq, the two world wars were funded and fronted by the same people who were connected to the same network. The Russian Revolution was funded from Wall Street and London. Hitler was funded via the German subsidiaries of American and British multinational corporations, and via the Bank of England, whose head at the time was a guy called Montague Norman,
all right, David,
who was a very close friend of Hitler's banker.
All right, hold it right there, David. David Icke is my guest. Get a pencil and paper. When we come back, we'll tell you how to get his book. Go get that pencil and paper right now. Well, good morning, everybody. In a moment, we're going to get back to David Icke, and when we do, we're going to tell you how to get his book. And by now, I've got a feeling you definitely are going to want it, so if you're prepared, it's coming up next. All right, David, you've got a number of books out. If somebody was going to, if you were going to recommend that somebody buy one of your books right now, which one would you be recommending?
It would be And the Truth Shall Set You Free.
And the Truth Shall Set You Free.
Yeah, it's 500 pages of constantly sourced and highly detailed information, which takes the theory out of conspiracy theory and shows that this is happening, and it's not just someone's kind of imagination. The cross-referencing of names and information and subject areas is stunning, because the evidence is there. What did they say? The truth is out there. It certainly is if you want to look for it.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I understand right now, as in this moment, they can call the number and there's actual people there?
That's right, yeah. Some very dedicated people who are trying to make sure this information gets out. 1-800-321-9054.
All right, that's 1-800-321-9054, and they can actually call right now. Now, normally, on any other day, this is a special deal tonight, I guess. Any other day, it's between 8:30 in the morning and 5:30 in the afternoon. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, but folks, if the lines are busy, please keep trying. No matter what you do, write the number down. Get this book, 1-800-321-9054, and the truth shall set you free. David, who's winning right now? In other words, if this elite genealogy that is in control and trying to grab control and creating incidents, God knows we're having plenty of them. Buildings blow up in Oklahoma. Marines are blown up in Lebanon and in Arab countries, and on and on and on. And now it's coming home. You know, if you really looked at it and you looked at, well, are we becoming a freer people or are we becoming a more enslaved people? I'm not very optimistic about the way it's going right now.
Well, the Chinese have a word, and the same word means crisis and opportunity, and we are at a big point of crisis and opportunity. Every crisis is an opportunity. Just to give you a quick symbolic story of the situation as I see it. I had a comedian friend who died back in England in 1995, and at his memorial service, a story was told about something that happened to him, which was a funny story, but it's stunning in its symbolism of the time we're in and where the true power lies. He was in an all-male show in the 1960s going around the music halls, and he used to do kind of female impersonation and stuff, and the last scene was all the men in the show came on the scene. It was a great show, really classy, dressed as sailors, singing Rule Britannia. And they formed themselves into a pyramid on the stage, leaving a bit at the top for this guy to come on. Larry Grayson, his name was. And he came on at the end while this music was building up and the singing was going on, dressed as Britannia, with the shield and the helmet and all that stuff.
Oh, sure.
And he was manhandled to the top of the pyramid for the big finish. And in his own words, in this piece was read at his memorial service, he said, one night things seemed to be going rather well. And he's at the top of this pyramid for the big finish. And he said, but one night he said, one of the sailors in the bottom left-hand corner of the pyramid, he said, got rather a cough. And he said, eventually this little sailor boy is coughing his guts up and he can't hold his position anymore, and he fell out of the pyramid. Now, of course, what happened was the whole pyramid collapsed, and Larry Grayson, the symbolic of this elite at the top, ended up in the second row. And what had happened there is an ordinary man and sailor in the street had got a cough, stepped out of the pyramid, and the whole thing had collapsed. What we've been manipulated to believe is that the power in a pyramidal structure is at the top. That's where the power isn't, unless we give it away. The power is in the base of the pyramid, which is holding the top there. But what happens is that we are persuaded to give our power away all the time to this authority at the top of the pyramid, and the power that is used to control the human race every day is merely the power the human race gives away every day. And one of the key aspects, and again, if you follow this story and the techniques from the ancient world to today, if they work, keep using them, and that's certainly what's happened. A key element has been to divide and rule the base of the pyramid, if you like. So we've had religions created, and if you follow the process, first of all, a religion is created. That creates conflict with another religion you've created. Then these individual religions, they're then broken up at one point or other into warring factions. So you've got the religions fighting among themselves and fighting with other religions. Then you bring in politics, and you do the same. You bring in business, and you do banking and all this stuff, and you keep bringing in all these means for conflict. And symbolically, what's happening, more than symbolically, if you look at the pyramid, is the base of the pyramid, instead of looking up and saying, who's pulling the strings of all of us, we're fighting among ourselves. I see it. You must see it too. In the subject areas that are discussed on this show, in the UFO research area, in the conspiracy research area.
Oh, yes.
It's like, honestly, it's like we say it in England, it's like handbags at 10 paces. I mean, if we don't stop trying to be superior over each other, trying to gossip about each other and undermine each other and all the rest of it, we've got to start uniting as a people, and in areas of this research, we've got to start uniting on what we agree on, and respecting differences, instead of allowing ourselves to be disunited, therefore divide and ruled, on what we don't agree on. Because it doesn't matter if you're into Judaism, or you're a Christian, or you're a New Ager, or you're a UFO buff, or whatever, we're all gonna get the whirlwind unless we start working together and helping each other and supporting each other and uniting behind the thing that we all depend on, and that's not just continuing freedom, it's actually having it for the first time in a very long time. So if we allow ourselves to be divided and ruled, therefore the fighting among ourselves, then the few are going to go on string pulling both sides. Because this is the thing I think we need to appreciate, is that if you're going to control a game, say it's a football match, if you control one side, then you're going to influence the game massively, but you're not going to control the outcome because you have an unknown quantity, which is the other team. So what this brotherhood does, as I said right at the start of our chat, it is one organization that works through many organizations. It works through both sides. So it will be at work in the UFO community, creating conflict, divide and rule, putting disinformation in there. It's the same in all areas. In this conspiracy research, it puts people in there to divide and rule and mislead. And so we've got to start getting streetwise and starting to filter information and look at it without taking it on face value, including what I say. And we've got to start working together as a unit instead of allowing this divide and rule to go on. Because just look at the world.
Without David, without intervention, what kind of timeline do you see?
If you look at the Gregorian calendar and the way it's been structured to focus consciousness on the end of a cycle across what we call the millennium. Now, there's a number of things that are going to unfold here. I've already talked about the fact that many chaos cards will be played to create fear, to create division, and therefore have a global demand for something must be done, and then the agenda comes in. But also, whenever you get to a end of a cycle or a definite point or what appears to be a point in time, especially the end of a millennium, you get the consciousness start to think about, well, let's draw a line here. Let's look at all the conflict we've had in this century. Look at all the conflict we've had up to this point in this millennium. Let's start again. Let's have a new world. Let's have a blank sheet of paper. And if you can create chaos in the run-up to that and across that point, that even more encourages this mentality of, come on, we've got to start again. We need a new world. And if you can then control the nature of that new world and you persuade people that centralization of power is people coming together, then you can put in global centralized institutions and you can mask them as the world coming together as one. I've talked to people, for instance, Art, in this area that's called the New Age, And they equate oneness, the world coming together as one people, with world government, world central bank, world army, not everybody, but a significant numbers. And we need to see the difference between people coming together, having power over their own lives in their own communities, cooperating with each other across national borders, looking after each other, caring for each other, and what is actually the opposite of that, centralized institutions that are designed to put power into tiny number of hands at a global level. And I'll give you an example of where it's going, and this is already happening. When the European Central Bank for the European Union comes into force, as it is now, the currency of Europe, which will be one currency, the interest rates and what happens about that currency across the whole of Europe will be controlled by 6 unelected bankers with an 8-year guaranteed period of tenure. And not even the elected part of the European Union will be able to influence or override the economic decisions of those bankers. That's fascism. And if you look at the fascist symbol from which we get the word fascist, it's actually an ancient Roman symbol, which is a series of rods tied together very tightly with an axe head at the top. That's where we get the word fascism from, that Roman symbol. I've just described the European Union, which is countries tied together tightly under a centralized bureaucratic dictatorship. And, of course, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, is designed to create in stepping stones the America's version of the European Union. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, the European Union, what we joined in Europe, was not a centralized bureaucratic dictatorship, which we now have. But we actually joined a free trade area. That's David, what it was supposed to be.
Right, but David, don't we need it? If we want to compete with the Asian bloc and the European bloc, we have to do that, don't we?
Well, this is an interesting point. Again, we get the word compete and we get the word blocks. Because this goes back so far, and it has to. I mean, you cannot create the structures of manipulation that we have today in a few minutes, a few years, a few decades.
But, David, it's also a natural evolution. In other words, first we had little villages. They traded with other villages. Then cities trading with cities. Areas trading with areas. States trading with states. Nations trading with nations. And now blocks of nations trading with blocks of nations. And then, obviously, next, a one-world economy.
Yeah, the question is this: when you follow the story and you see how the agenda has actually been unfolding over a very long period of time, is that natural or is that created? When you look at the way that the whole thing's unfolded, like I said, you look at this century, but you go further back, and what you've just described actually is the process over this period of time that I'm talking about, thousands of years, and it's got quicker and quicker the more that these bloodlines have expanded their power, particularly after the expansion of the European and particularly British empires across the world, which took these bloodlines right across the planet. This thing's advanced and got quicker. But what you've just described is the process of power going into fewer and fewer and fewer hands.
Absolutely.
Now, where's it going to end? If this continues, it's going to end with the very agenda that is demonstrably being introduced now, which is complete centralization of global power. I mean, how ludicrous that we have in Europe, and this is just the stepping stone before the global level, that European laws made by bureaucrats in Brussels override nationally, apparently democratically decided laws in the individual countries. And that's just the blueprint which is being prepared for the global level, where what is dictated to at a world government level will override decisions made in your community, decisions made in your country. We're going to have a global fascist state. But of course, if that was offered openly, there'd be a reaction against it. So it's being done stepping stone style, one step following another, leading in this direction, while each step is projected in the public arena as completely unconnected to the other.
How do you know it's inevitably going to be fascist? I certainly agree that we're headed toward a single control ultimately, but how can you be sure of the nature of that control?
Well, all you've got to do is look, and the research is possible, at the people who are pressing for this to happen. If anyone's not got curly hair or hair that stands on end, then they will do when they read The Biggest Secret, because in February, because I've exposed what these major players are involved in. People like Kissinger, whose power didn't end when he ceased to be Secretary of State. He operates through an organization called Kissinger Associates, and that would make anyone's hair curl when you see what that's involved in. And you look at the major players and the names that keep coming up, and you look at what they're involved in. It's just utterly staggering what they're involved in. The royal family. In Britain, when the story comes out, as it's going to in the book, what they're involved in, it is utterly grotesque and staggering. So you look at the personalities, the attitudes of the people who are pressing for this centralization and are manipulating it, and my goodness me, you can see where they're really coming from. And, we've got to, I think, see the difference, as I said earlier, between centralization of power and cooperation. I have no problem with global organizations that coordinate between nation states and people in their communities, that create networks of cooperation so we can help each other and all that stuff. No problem with trading and all that stuff if it's done on a fair basis. But the further that decision-making goes from the people affected by the decisions, the worse the decisions become. And now we're in a situation, we're one step away, indeed we're closing in on it fast, where decisions that fundamentally affect 5 billion or more people will be taken by a literal handful. And that is fascism. But, of course, fascism and communism are the same thing. It's still centralization of power and dictatorship. It's just a different name on the door and a different dress on that door.
You cannot imagine a benign dictatorship.
Well, I think it's a contradiction in terms. If we're going to be free, we need to be free to have control over our own lives and not be dictated to by anyone. And for me, three things would change this world and change our lives. One, as individuals, we step out of the biggest prison that we live in, and the prison that allows this manipulation to go on and always has. The fear of what other people think of us. Once you're in fear of what other people think, you are no longer living your life, you're living theirs. And if you can set the agenda of what is, like I said earlier, this hassle-free zone of what's right and wrong, what's good and bad, what's moral or immoral, what's sane or insane, then you set the agenda of how people judge each other.
All right, David, I think I've got it. Hold it right there for a moment. As we close this hour, we're going to take calls next hour. Yes, we're going to take calls. And I think David has made a very cogent presentation. If you would like his book, And the Truth Shall Set You Free, call right now, 1-800-321-9054. That's 1-800-321-9054. If you want a copy of this entire program, beginning to end, 5 hours, you can get it by calling 1-800-917-4278. I can well understand you might want a copy of this one. 1-800-917-4278 to get a copy of this program. That will do it for this hour. In some markets, when we get back, we'll take calls. Don't move. Well, it's called And the Truth Shall Set You Free. And the number to get it is 1-800-321-9054. That's David Icke's book, 1-800-321-9054. Right now, they've got only tonight operators standing by, actually probably sitting there and answering phones. And then normally from, I don't know, say 8:30 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, Eastern time. That's an important fact, Eastern time. You do a show like this, you have to remember you're crossing a lot of time zones, so that's Eastern time normally. But right now, you can call 1-800-321-9054. In a moment, with David, we're going to go to the phones. It'll be interesting to see what you have to say about all of this. And the truth shall set you free. Surely it would. The only question is, what is the truth? You've got to answer that before you can be free. All right. Once again, back to David Icke. David, before we go to phones, is there anything that, given the short time we've had, you have not been able to get on the air and want to get on the air before we do this?
Well, normally the questions take us in all these different other areas that because it's an amazing fact that once you see the structure and the agenda, virtually everything fits into it. Because what we're looking at is not actually a series of conspiracies and manipulations, but different aspects of the same one manipulation. And I would make this point too. What I'm actually talking about, funnily enough, is not a conspiracy at its heart. It's an agenda. The conspiracy comes in three ways. One, removing those people and organizations that are a threat to that agenda becoming reality. Putting people into positions of political and economic power that will make that agenda become reality, and manipulating the mass of the people through problem, reaction, solution to get them to demand the agenda becomes reality even though they don't realize it exists. In other words, do something, centralization of power is the answer. So these apparently unconnected conspiracies are actually connected by one thing, and that is either a threat to the agenda being removed, someone will bring the agenda in being put into power, or problem, reaction, solution to bring the agenda in and have it demanded by the public. So these are one manipulation with many faces, not a series of unconnected ones.
All right. I would like to, if I can, then go to the phones and let people ask you some questions, see how you deal with it. All right, fine. Yeah. Here we go. First-time caller line, you're on the air with David Icke. Hi. Where are you, please?
Hello. My name's Alan. I'm in the Seattle area, and I'm listening to you on the Como 1000.
Of course.
And I have a question for David.
Hi, Alan.
Hi. I'd like to know if you know anything about Dr. Spock, from the 50s. He was a psychiatrist.
The children guy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. No, I know nothing kind of direct on him, but in the general point, one of the things that I expose massively in the next book in February, The Biggest Secret, and other people have also done a lot of research into this area, is actually the Tavistock network in London. For historical reasons, London is a major center of this web. Not the government, which is just another facade, string pulled from behind, but actually the center of this web, epicentered in London some centuries ago, and this is why they had the great British Empire. It wasn't actually the British Empire, it was the empire of this group that had based itself in London, which is rather a different thing. And the Tavistock Institute is actually the center of the mind and mass consciousness manipulation web. They do tremendous research and have done for decades and decades, looking at what stimuli are needed to get a mass reaction of a certain kind. They also have worked with individual mind control. And getting to children very early has been a very big part of their operation and the whole manipulation, because if you can get them young, then you've got them for life. And interestingly, these guys all over the world that keep going crazy with guns and killing children, like we had this guy Thomas Hamilton in Dunblane, who killed the children in the gymnasium, and we've had this guy Martin Bryant in Port Arthur, Australia. Well, the manifestations of these guys who go crazy with guns, and then of course you've got a problem. And what is the solution every time? Taking guns out of circulation. And what has happened is that we've got, after these events happen, we've got pulled into a debate of whether guns are good or guns are bad, which is a debate worth having. But the bigger debate at this time is this: why in every country virtually I go into has someone gone crazy with a gun in the street or whatever, and then the solution has been gun laws taking guns out of circulation? Why is that happening everywhere now? And when you relate that to some of the things we've been discussing tonight on this show about the agenda coming up across the millennium, it's much easier to impose things on an unarmed population than an armed one. And what I've come across only this week is this guy Martin Bryant, who went crazy with a gun. He killed 35 people, something like that, in Port Arthur just a few years ago. He was treated, quote, for psychiatric disorders by a guy called Dr. Cunningham Dax, who was a Tavistock operative in Australia, and for many decades was a close associate of a guy called John Rawlings Rees, who was the inspiration from the start to create the Tavistock network of mind control research and imposition. So when you look at Jonesboro in this country and many other events where people do spectacularly off-the-wall things, we need to understand that it is possible to program the subconscious to do that, and then all it needs to activate is the trigger, and that subconscious programming becomes the conscious action. And to understand that is to understand many of the apparently inexplicable things that go on, and why, again, assassin after assassin and crazy man with a gun after crazy man with a gun is dubbed with the same character profile: lone nutter, no conspiracy. And so the manipulation of children and the minds of the adult population is all part of this manipulation, because as I said to Art earlier, you cannot control billions of people physically. You have to do it through the mind and the emotions, and that's the way it's done.
So you believe that the philosophy that he put forth might have something to do with the chaos we're seeing now in children?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should let, my personal opinion is that we should let children have access to all information, and we should encourage them to make their own mind up. And I think once we start playing with methods and processes and systems with children's minds in whatever way they are, we are already creating a prison situation instead of encouraging them to be free in their thinking. And I think there's a lot of people, who talk about freedom and the need for freedom, and then when you talk about the way they bring up their children, they say, oh, well, of course I bring them up the way I believe. Well, that's not freedom, and I think we ought to put all information in front of everybody and then respect their right to come to what conclusions they want to come to, instead of telling them what they should believe, which is what happens most of the time from cradle to grave.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dave.
Pleasure, Alan.
Thank you for the call. And Wildcard Line, you're on the air with David Icke. Hi.
Hello?
Hello, where are you?
Yes, hi, this is Jeff. I'm calling from near Tampa, Florida.
And, hey, Jeff. And on a digital cellular phone in a vehicle.
Yes, sir.
All right, see, I'm psychic. Go right ahead.
No, yeah, I knew you would like this phone. Actually, my question is this. The gentleman, you were mentioning an agenda, and I was wondering if, with the coming of the millennium and whatnot, if you suppose maybe this agenda could be from perhaps, a higher power, like, could this be in the big plan, maybe God's plan, or could ultimately this be have something to do with, the coming of the Antichrist or, anything of that nature? So I heard you talking, mentioning some things about having a spiritual awakening and some experiences of that sort.
Yeah, but I also made the difference in my view of life. And like I say, we need to be at peace with the way each of us believe. I have a simple philosophy: believe what you like as long as you don't impose it on anyone else. And so I made the distinction in my view of life between religion and spirituality. They can be the same thing, and people can express their spirituality through religion, but there are other aspects of religion that can be anything but spiritual. I don't think the Inquisition in Europe was an incredibly spiritual experience, and indeed was one of the main fundamental means that I talked about earlier of sucking knowledge out of the public arena so it could be hoarded even more tightly in the secret society network, because 5 minutes of the Art Bell show would have been a suicide note at the time of the Inquisition, of course, because you weren't allowed to talk about these things. But in terms of the agenda and what have you, and what's behind this, again, I go into this in enormous detail in The Biggest Secret, which is just about to go to press. It seems to me, the way that I'm looking at these things now, is that one of the key reasons why there is an obsession, there are a number of reasons, but one of the key reasons why there's an obsession with holding this genetic structure is somehow the vibrational resonance between that structure and the consciousness, which I think is operating from the lower fourth dimension, what other people call the lower astral, whatever name you call it. I call it the cesspit level. It's a level that vibrates to the lower vibrational emotions like fear and guilt and all this stuff.
You were speaking of the astral plane.
Yeah, I think that these particular key bloodlines resonate to a vibrational frequency that is far more compatible with this lower fourth dimension than the other genetic lines that are not of this particular type. And I think this world is actually being controlled from a consciousness that from the lower fourth dimension myself, and it particularly works through these particular bloodlines. And if you like, for want of a word, it can possess these bloodlines far more easier than it can the general human population. And therefore, if you can manipulate these particular bloodlines into the positions of power in the world, what you're actually doing is manipulating into these positions of power a physical form which has a resonant compatibility with this lower fourth dimensional consciousness. In other words, you're putting the fourth dimensional consciousness into the positions of power. And I've talked to so many people around the world who have come to this conclusion, to the staggering numbers, really, because it's not something that's widely talked about.
David, one quick interjection here. If there is at least a partial central control right now, and you certainly have alluded to that,
yeah,
why the hell aren't they doing a better job? The world is a mess right now, and if there is any kind of central control, they're certainly not exerting it with any effectiveness whatsoever. We have starvation, we have third world countries that are a disaster, that are beginning to industrialize, we've got Iraq, we've got little wars and troubles going on all over the place. Where's the control?
Exactly. You've actually described perfectly the control. Let me say some more about that. Try manipulating harmony. It's very difficult. Say I've got a room of people with me here. I haven't actually, but if I had a room of people with me here and we were in harmony, we respected each other's right to have a difference of opinion, and we wanted to help each other when we were in trouble, and we were together, and we were really supporting each other. You try manipulating that situation. If I have a room of people here and I don't like that person, and I'm having conflict with that person, and he doesn't like the lady over there, and they're having conflict. Suddenly, you're in a situation you can control, because now you've got sides to play off against each other. So chaos is fundamental to control. Actually, the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, I understand, has a Latin motto, ordo ad chaos, order out of chaos, which actually is problem, reaction, solution. And you talk about the famine and the starvation and stuff. Well, that's fundamental to the control for this reason. When you are in a situation where you have abundance and you have, therefore, choice, you are much more in control of your life. You're not dependent, that's the key word, you're not dependent on someone else to fill your belly. You're not dependent on some unpredictable, manipulated world commodity market, so that you have to depend on the price that sets for what you're selling to whether your country's going to eat or whether this is going to happen or this is going to happen or not. So what has happened, for instance, in Africa? I mean, I've been to Africa quite recently, and the idea that Africa cannot feed itself is utterly ludicrous.
No, but I'll tell you what is going on in Africa. I was there a month ago.
Yeah.
What's going on in Africa is anarchy.
Exactly.
And I mean serious anarchy. In the cities, Johannesburg, even Cape Town, you cannot go out at night and expect to live through the experience. I mean, the crime rate there is absolutely unbelievable. And since Nelson Mandela took over, I think he's afraid to move politically because he's afraid to be seen as that which was, you know, the iron hand that had control of everything supposedly at one time. And so he's doing nothing. And as a result, it's Russia times 10 right now over there. It's horrid.
Right. Well, I could talk about that because I too have been to Johannesburg and spoke and researched all around.
Well, then you know
that area of the world. Yeah,
you know.
But I'll just make this point before I come to that. The point being that what has happened in Africa is that transnational corporations with an interlocking leadership, when you go high enough up the pyramid,
have gone in there and they have taken food-growing land. They have put corrupt politicians in there to rule on their behalf, as they say, like the military junta in Nigeria, etc., which is controlled by Shell Oil.
Right.
And therefore, they have created a situation in which a continent that could feed itself is not feeding itself as a first priority. It's growing vast amounts of its food-growing area. It's growing cash crops for the Western industry and the Western food industry and the Western chocolate industry, etc. And therefore, it's making Africa dependent over whether it eats or not on selling those commodities, getting money back, and then buying food in. It's created dependency, and dependency equals control. But the South Africa situation is very, very interesting and a fundamental point to make here. When I talk about the Great British Empire and all that stuff, people say, yeah, I can understand that. The empire, it controlled this country and it controlled that country, but it doesn't control them anymore, so it can't be true now. Well, what has happened? And this is so important a point to make, is that overt control, in-your-face dictatorship, always has a finite life, because people know where they are. They're in a dictatorship.
Right.
And eventually the human desire for freedom will rebel against that. So the most profound and effective form of control is covert control, whereby you're running the show, but no one knows you're running the show because people don't rebel against not being free when they think they are. Now, let's take the South African example of this. It's a wonderful example.
Okay.
Before Mandela was led off Robben Island and became president, the Oppenheimer family controlled 80% of the stock on the South African stock market. They owned the diamond and the gold mines on which the economy depends, and they controlled the media through various frontmen. Because that was, we had white minority rule, that was an in-your-face, overt dictatorship. There was, of course, a great rebellion against it. The whole focus of world attention was, this is not free, this is apartheid, this is outrageous. So we then have the move to Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela is now president. Okay, who controls the country? Today, under black majority rule, the Oppenheimer family control 80% of the stock on the South African stock market. They own the diamond and gold mines on which the economy depends, and they control the media through various frontmen, not least an Irish guy called Tony O'Reilly. The difference is, however, Art, that no one's pointing to South Africa now and saying it's a dictatorship, it's not free human rights, because they're saying, oh, South Africa's sorted, we've got a black president, and off they go. But the same people run the show. And this is what's happened. As the great empires of Europe contracted on the surface, they left behind the bloodlines and they left behind the secret society networks that have gone on running those countries covertly, and that can go on forever until someone points out that it's going on, because most people don't realize who runs their country.
All right, we can't go on forever. We've got to stop here. It's the bottom of the hour. David Icke is my guest. I'm Art Bell from the high desert. This is Coast to Coast AM. Once again, here I am. Good morning, everybody. David Icke is my guest, and we're talking about our future, your future, my future, David's, what it's going to be, and we will be right back. All right, David, are you there?
I'm still there, right? Yeah.
All right, excellent. Here we go once again. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with David Icke. Hi.
Hello. I wanted to mention a magazine called Covert Action Quarterly, and it's put out by some former CIA and FBI agents who became so disgusted with the disinformation that were peddled constantly throughout the Cold War to justify non-existent and exaggerated foreign threats, especially on an anti-communist propaganda basis, to cover up for the fact that the real conspiracy is right here, designating as villains and demons anyone who disobeys the dictates of the transnational corporations and their police, secret police informers such as the Central Intelligence Agency.
Okay, well, I will give you, caller, this. The CIA was said to have dramatically, perhaps even intelligently, overestimated the Russian threat for all those years.
Well, what I wanted to get to, Art, is the fact that I think right now we have a situation where the death head's face is being exposed in this attempt to visit genocide once again on Iraq after starving about 1.5 million people to death, demonizing Saddam Hussein. And I think the control of the media is essential to this. A book called Reliable Sources shows how the media has acted in demonizing very varied characters, different from each other, whether it's Castro or Saddam Hussein or the Serbs in Serbia. They have little in common except the fact that they have been uncooperative in obeying the dictates of the transnational corporations, the International Monetary Fund, and have refused to align themselves with such agencies such as NATO, which your guest has mentioned, or the United States. Unlike, for instance, in Yugoslavia, where the Croats and the Muslims have opportunistically signed on with NATO and the International Monetary Fund, the Serbs have refused this privatization type of policy that has spelled such disaster in the Soviet Union, pushing 75% of the people into starvation and poverty. Yet this is, I think, the real motivating force behind these kinds of interventions to, in effect, tell Saddam Hussein, we will starve, bleed, and break your country and your people, not because of these weapons of mass destruction, because we've said that even if you obey all of these humiliating demands, we're still not going to stop starving and bleeding your people until you overthrow your government and put into power a submissive, subservient puppet.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, David.
Well, there's a list of things there which all interconnect. First of all, let me go back to what I said not too long ago. If you're going to control a game, you have to control both sides, or you're not going to control the outcome. So what we need to do, I feel, is stop looking at people on different sides of a conflict. What I mean is not the people in general, but the people in control of the people on different sides, and stop seeing them as opposing forces and start seeing them as different faces of the same organization. For instance, Saddam Hussein, long, long ago, was a member of a very elite secret society called the Safari Club, which CIA people were also members of. And the Safari Club spawned something in France called the Pinet Circle, or Le Cercle, which has done fundamental manipulation and terrorist activity in Europe, and not least in France. And they are a network that was almost certainly involved in the coordination of the assassination of Diana, Princess of Wales, which I expose in enormous detail in this book, The Biggest Secret, and massively connected to the royal family and other people. So when you look at a situation of Bush back in the first Gulf War against Saddam Hussein, we need to start looking at two faces of the same side. And the pawns in the game are the American people, which Bush was over, and the Iraqi people, which Saddam Hussein was over. Why did Bush, who condemned Hussein as the new Hitler, and actually Bush should know because his father, Prescott Bush, was one of the funders of Hitler, through the Harriman organization, well documented in my books and others, why suddenly did he stop before he got to Baghdad? People were taken aback. What's going on here? Why hasn't he completed the job?
I was one of them,
yeah, exactly. Why? Because they wanted to keep that situation so they could play the card again. I mean, the call is absolutely right. Again, we come to creating fear. Once you get people in fear, they'll give their power away to anyone they think will protect them against what they fear. So you bring in Colonel Gaddafi, a threat to the world. Whatever happened to him? And then you get another monster, and then he'll disappear, and they'll bring another one forward. First of all, it was Russia. And the call is absolutely right about the Cold War. I've talked to people in the intelligence community who were staggered to realize, because of course the intelligence community is fundamentally compartmentalized. Most people in the CIA are not trying to manipulate people. They think they're serving the country. It's like all these organizations. They were staggered to realize during the Cold War that American intelligence at a high level was passing over weapon technology and know-how to the Russians, so the Russians would keep parity or, in an ideal world, slightly ahead of the West. Why? Because if you want to justify massive arms spending with your companies which you control, and you want to up the ante of fear, frightening the West against the East and the East against the West, then if Russia's miles behind you, then the fear is dissipated. What? Russians can't even hit America. We're not frightened of them. So you ensure that there is parity or the Russians are just ahead. And then you go, oh my good, the Russians are ahead of us. Oh my good, oh fear. We must have more arms spending. We must increase our nuclear arsenal. And then cynically the point came, and I actually predicted this in an earlier book, where the agenda's timescale, because it has a fundamental timescale, was to start to encompass the former Soviet Union countries into NATO and into the European Union, which is now happening.
Oh, yes.
But that could never happen while, in Reagan's words, the Soviet Union was perceived as the evil empire. So out of nowhere comes Mikhail Gorbachev, the first Russian leader in Russian history who didn't look like he'd just come back from a funeral. Suddenly, the wall comes down, Russia starts to have a smiling face, and bingo, the whole situation breaks up, allowing the encompassing into NATO and the European Union of these countries. Now, as I've shown in my previous books, Mikhail Gorbachev was a fundamental associate all the way through this, before he became president, of David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger. What's Gorbachev doing now? He's running the Gorbachev Foundation, which puts on global events with top entertainers and top politicians calling for world government and world institutions to solve the problems of the world. It's all a movie. The CNN, I call it the movie channel. It's a movie we're watching, and we need to look behind the movie to see what's really going on.
All right. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with David Icke. Hi.
Hi.
Where are you?
This is Les in Honolulu, KVH Radio 830.
That's KHVH, yes.
KHVH Radio, yeah. With regards to the fundamental time scale you're talking about, I got two questions. One, going back in that time scale 300 years, and then my second will be to present day. Back in the early 70s when I attended the University of Virginia, I was taken aside by a friend who is an assistant history professor who said, let me tell you a few things I'm not allowed to teach. He told me I learned a lot about Thomas Jefferson and how his focus was basically decentralized government, moving away from what they were doing in Europe, centralized government and industrialized city centers, and to come over here and form a nation that was based on a decentralized government and an agrarian society. And what we had was a Revolutionary War, and the British couldn't do anything about it then. They lost. They tried again in the War of 1812. That didn't quite work. So they decided to move their banking operations to the Northeast United States. And then we had the Civil War. And they told us it was about slavery, but actually it was an economic war. It was a banking war. And then we lost our revolution, so to speak. So I would like to get your comment on that and then ask my second question.
Well, again, in the Biggest Secret, as well as other books, I've gone into great detail into this period of the American Revolution, 1776 and beyond. 1776 was a key year, and I've been talking over the last few days on the phone briefly, but interestingly, with Richard Hoagland, who's come to the same conclusions. We've come to the same conclusions independently of how certain things happen at certain times, because we go back to the ancient world and we go back to this fundamental knowledge that's been sucked out of the public arena, but is held at the levels of the controlling elite that I'm talking about, and that is the knowledge of cycles, sun cycles, etc., etc. Cycles which affect consciousness in certain ways, and energy flows which allow certain things to happen more effectively and more powerfully at certain times. So it's become very clear in my research that they don't have things happen in certain years, and they don't hold summits at certain places at certain times unless it's fundamentally in sync with the cycles they understand. Particularly sun cycles and the projections of energy from the sun. Of course, and across the year 2000, there's tremendous solar activity projected.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure that the Gregorian calendar syncing with that cycle is absolutely no coincidence whatsoever. But So 1776 was also the year that the Bavarian Illuminati was formed on May the 1st, which is one of their key ritual days of the year, run by a guy called Adam Weishaupt, who was then behind the French Revolution and many other revolutions in Europe. But I think it's so important that we suspend our dogma and we suspend our belief and we allow the information to lead us rather than our own preconceived ideas. And I've done a lot of research into the Founding Fathers, and I'm sure many of them had the best interests of people at heart, but some of them certainly didn't, and I'll name one, Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was the Henry Kissinger of his day. He was working for British intelligence. He was very close to the British royal family. In fact, if you look at the history, this guy spent most of the time around the American Revolution, actually in London. He was a very close associate of a guy called Francis Dashwood, who ran a satanic ritual sacrifice operation called the Hellfire Club, which involved members of the royal family, which shouldn't surprise anyone because the present royal family is into all that stuff in Britain as well, as I'm about to expose in detail. Franklin was also a major Freemason in America, and he was a member of the key Freemasonry lodges in France. And he was playing all sides off against the center. And for me, when you look at this dispassionately, as I can as an Englishman in America, the American Revolution was to a very, very large extent an example of what I talked about earlier, replacing overt control, which had a finite life, because those colonies were going to rebel eventually, if not then eventually, with covert control. And I think that so many, and this can be shown, so many strings that pull the economic and political system of America are actually pulled from Europe, particularly London. And just to finish the Benjamin Franklin story, to say that he was involved in ritual sacrifice and all that stuff is extreme, and I understand that, but this probably wasn't reported in Britain. But earlier this year, a story broke in London, in the London papers. They've given a grant of about £1.5 million to restore and renovate Benjamin Franklin's former house in Craven Street in London near Trafalgar Square, where he lived during the time I'm talking about. When they got under the floor as part of the renovation, they found 10 bodies, 6 of them children, in which there's been some unpleasant things done to them. They've got holes in the skulls and stuff like that, and they've dated them to the time Benjamin Franklin was there, and the way that they've explained it, or tried to, is that Ben must have been into body snatching for medical research. Well, when you put that together with the Hellfire Club and that's infamous history and what it did in sacrificial chambers in a place called, or near High Wycombe, where Dashwood's estate was, then the whole thing starts to make sense, especially when these famous, world-famous people that are running the show today are into the very same ritual, and I can prove this from
David,
people who have been there and seen it.
David, because of the length of the question, length of the answer, and time left, I'm going to just jump in and ask you.
Okay.
You said Princess, you just went running right by this. Princess Di was assassinated.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to ask you who, because I don't want to be in trouble.
Right.
I'm going to ask you why.
Well, again, that would take around half an hour, but I'll summarize it briefly. I go into this in great detail in the book, and I've just got the opportunity to produce an hour, 2-hour documentary explaining what happened. I've been to Paris, and I've really researched this, and it's interesting that if we had half an hour to talk about this, all the kind of strands that we've talked about over the last 3 hours come together in this thing. The symbolism, these people are massively into symbolism, and you can read them through their symbols. For instance, one of the key symbols of this group in their secret language is the lighted torch. And the lighted torch is, of course, held by the Statue of Liberty, which was given to New York by French Freemasons. And a replica of the Statue of Liberty is on an island in the River Seine in Paris.
Right.
What did they do? It's a signature. When Kennedy was assassinated in Dealey Plaza, which was the scene of the first Freemasons Lodge in Dallas, and is a very big symbolic area in occult lore, the Freemasons, after the assassination, and it's still there, put an obelisk, which is an ancient symbol going back to very ancient times, Egypt and stuff, and on the top of that obelisk in Dealey Plaza, literally yards from where Kennedy died, they put a lighted torch or a depiction of one. What did they put on Kennedy's grave? They put the lighted torch, the eternal flame. What is the place, the ritual place, or the place of commemoration to Diana at the Pont d'Alma tunnel in Paris? It's a lighted torch. In fact, it's a replica on top of that tunnel of the flame held by the Statue of Liberty. What have they put on the island in Althorpe Park where Diana's said to be buried? They put a lighted torch. This is the signature, and you can read it. That's the main one, but there are many others. And when you look at the symbolism, when you go back through these bloodlines to the Merovingians in France, they were the people that created the city we call Paris. They worshipped an ancient goddess called the goddess Diana, who was a moon goddess, symbolic of the moon. When they created Paris, initially, they built on the outskirts of the original Paris, but very much within the modern Paris, sacrificial chambers where they sacrificed to the goddess Diana. That sacrificial underground chamber the Merovingians built in the 8th century, 7th, 8th century, and earlier, in fact, is now another underground chamber. It's the Pont d'Alma tunnel where Diana died. Pont d'Alma means passage or bridge of the moon goddess, which is what Diana was supposed to represented. And the reason, and this is why we've had this tremendous questioning of why someone with injuries that if they'd have been got to hospital quickly, she would have survived. Why was she kept in that tunnel for 95 minutes before they moved to the hospital? The reason was, and it's a throwaway line here because of time, but I document this in enormous detail in The Biggest Secret. The reason they kept her there is she had to die there according to their ritual, because these people are so into ritual, it's staggering, and you can read them that way. And as I've explained in this Biggest Secret about the Kennedy assassination, you look at occult ritual, that was the symbolic assassination of a sun god, just as the assassination of Diana was the assassination of a moon goddess. And on the three-dimensional, non-symbolic way, I also completely connect it to the British royal family, who was fundamentally involved, and I name them. And it's time to stop running away, Art, and it's time to start running at this.
It's also time to stop the program. We're out of time. Okay. Very quickly. And the truth shall set you free. The phone number to call right now is 1-800, you finish it.
321-9054. 1-800-321-9054, and it will be in the post this morning if you ring now.
All right, very good. I want you to stay on the line for a moment so I can get a more permanent phone number from you so we can do a future show. All right? David, it has been a pleasure.
Pleasure, Art. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, my friend. Stay right there, and I'll be back directly. Well, all right. That's it. If you would like a copy of this program, the entire 5 hours, and it's all been equally compelling, the number is 1-800-917-4278. That's 1-800-917-4278. And if you want your hair to stand on end, stay tuned for what comes next. I'm Art Bell.